The third year of marriage, a new boss was dropped into Pearl Fairchild's company. It turned out to be her plastic husband, whom she had barely seen outside of bed during his 3 years abroad. The man was dressed in a crisp black suit, with sharp brows and cold features. When his dark, indifferent eyes looked at her, they held only a stranger's warmth, as if he didn't know her at all. That night at home, Pearl was pinned against the kitchen island, kissed until she was breathless. She couldn't help but push at the man in front of her. "You're kissing too hard." Keaton Kingsley's Adam's apple bobbed. His rolled-up shirt cuffs revealed a section of cold, stern wrist bone, which still bore her bite marks. "Don't act cute just yet." He pinched her chin, pressing her closer, and fingered her empty ring finger. "Explain, why did you say you were single at the company?" Pearl had always thought her relationship with Keaton was nothing more than a business alliance. He only married her because of the relationship between their two families, until she actively proposed a divorce. In the middle of that night, she woke up inadvertently. Keaton was standing on the balcony, holding the divorce papers and smoking. She walked over, reaching out to snatch the cigarette from his hand. She urged him to sign. Keaton said nothing. His dark eyes stared heavily at her for a few seconds. He extinguished the cigarette and, right in front of her, tore the divorce papers to shreds. "Guess whether I'm going to sign this tonight or jump directly from here." Keaton only turned back once in his life. Using all his strength, crushing his bones, just for Pearl 8:00 p.m. The company's team-building event wasn't over yet. Several colleagues were gathered by the pool taking photos. Pearl had an allergy on her face recently, so she didn't go over for photos. She sat alone on the side drinking juice, looking at her allergic face in the front-facing camera. The spreading red rash hadn't improved after almost a week. Instead, it had gotten worse. It was all Keaton's fault. The night before his business trip last week, they had gone too far. In the end, she felt like the condom might have broken. Worried about getting pregnant, Pearl secretly took emergency contraceptive pills after he left, resulting in an allergy and a rash that still hadn't healed. Returning to the country tonight. A message from Keaton suddenly popped up on WeChat. Pearl was startled, and her phone dropped to her feet. She bent down to pick it up and suddenly glimpsed the latest issue of a finance weekly magazine on the glass table in front of her. Just as she reached out to take it, someone walked over and sat down right next to her. "You can still drink alcohol with your allergy?" It was Zoe Miller, Pearl's slacking buddy at the company. "No alcohol content." Pearl picked up her phone, leaned back in the chair, checked if the phone was broken, and casually replied to the message. Got it. The chat history was almost blank. The last conversation stopped half a month ago. She replied, received. Those who knew would know it was her husband. Those who didn't would think it was her boss. "Have you heard? The company is getting a new boss next week." Zoe and she had a good relationship, and all the company gossip relied on Zoe's sharing. Pearl turned off her phone, picked up the unfinished juice, and continued drinking, saying indifferently, "I don't know. Changing bosses doesn't really concern us." Zoe shook her head with a mysterious look. "That's because you don't know the background of our new boss." Pearl was curious. "What background?" Zoe didn't speak but turned around, seemingly looking for something. "I heard he's from Hong Kong. He's been developing in the mainland for the past few years. A while ago, he listed a construction company on the NYSE and then aggressively acquired Von Schning directly at the headquarters in Manhattan. He'll be dropping into the company next week." Pearl chewed on the juice straw, her mind only thinking about Keaton coming back. Her allergy hadn't healed yet. If he found out she was allergic because she secretly took birth control pills, he would definitely give her attitude. She listened absent-mindedly. Zoe talked for a while, then suddenly saw the magazine on the table and reached out to take it. "Here, this is him, the new boss, see for yourself." "Hey," Pearl's phone suddenly rang. It was the family driver coming to pick her up. "Oh, got it, coming out now." She made a gesture to Zoe, pressing her phone to her ear while grabbing her bag and coat to walk out. Zoe paused, seeing her leave, and didn't stay there any longer. She picked up her wine glass and walked toward the front. The pool beside them was still noisy, the blue walls reflecting the shimmering light. On the glass table nearby, a magazine with a black and gold background featured a man on the cover in a dark gray suit and black Oxford shoes. One hand was in his pocket, revealing a section of cold, white, sharp wrist bone. covered with faint blue veins over lean, powerful lines. His features were cold and three-dimensional, with deep brow bones and an extremely superior contour and skeletal structure. A pair of dark eyes gazed blandly at the lens. The curve of his lips was indifferent, but his gaze carried a sharp sense of oppression. At the bottom, the man's name was written in German, and the three words in pale gold Chinese translation were, Keaton Kingsley. The team-building event was originally supposed to last until midnight. Pearl received a call from Keaton's driver and went outside. A black Bentley was parked by the roadside. She walked over. The driver got out first to open the door. "Mrs. Kingsley, Mr. Kingsley is still at the airport. He asked me to take you back first." Pearl gave an "oh," threw her bag and coat into the back seat, and climbed into the car. The car drove forward, shadows of trees flickering past the window. She and Keaton had registered their marriage 3 years ago, but they hadn't held a wedding. The Fairchild and Kingsley families were old friends. The alliance was essentially a done deal. However, Keaton's original marriage partner wasn't her. Pearl was the third daughter of the Fairchild family, the youngest. Above her were two sisters similar in age to Keaton, Serena and Zinnia. Keaton was from Hong Kong but attended university in Beijing. He was a student of Pearl's mother, Gwendolyn Vance. Back then, Pearl was still in high school, younger than both her sisters, and didn't know Keaton well. Only during the winter break of her senior year did Keaton tutor her for a month. But during that month, Keaton showed no interest in her. Later, their relationship became even more distant. But 3 years ago, when the Fairchilds and Kingsleys were uniting, Keaton specifically named her to marry. To this day, Pearl didn't understand why he chose her. It was almost dawn when she got home. The villa seemed empty and cold. Keaton hadn't arrived home yet. Only her ragdoll cat, Kitty, was flicking its tail, lying coldly on the leather sofa watching her. Pearl didn't plan to wait for him. She showered and climbed into bed, falling asleep immediately. In the middle of the night, she was woken by the sound of water. It came from the bathroom. The night light in the bedroom was on, and she could faintly see a black suitcase in the cloakroom area. She turned over, intending to go back to sleep. Click! The bathroom door opened. The man was wearing a black bathrobe. His figure was tall and upright, carrying the dampness of a shower. In the dim light, his face wasn't clear, only the three-dimensional and deep contours of his features, carrying an extremely indifferent air. The mattress beside her dipped. Pearl buried her face in the pillow, first smelling the cold scent of aftershave. The dark room was silent. The person beside her made no movement. Pearl pursed her lips and quietly turned over, intending to pretend to be asleep, but her back instantly pressed against a warm, hard body. "I'm not sleeping yet." Keaton's cold voice sounded from the side. Pearl didn't speak, squeezing her eyes shut to continue feigning sleep. However, the next second, her calf was suddenly grasped by a large, rough palm. Before Pearl could react, she was suddenly pinned underneath him. The quilt that was originally covering her disappeared. Keaton had turned off the light at some point and pressed onto her in the darkness. Pearl's body stiffened for a moment. Feeling the breath falling on her neck, she pursed her lips and reached out to wrap her arms around his neck. "What's wrong with your face?" Hot breath sprayed onto her neck as Keaton suddenly asked. Even with the lights off, he discovered it. "Nothing." Afraid he would discover she had secretly taken birth control pills, Pearl raised her hand to cover his eyes. "Don't look." Keaton's kiss deepened, then stopped. He removed her hand, propped his arm beside her, pinched her chin, and lifted her face. Under the dim, hazy light, there were small patches of red rash on Pearl's face, spreading from her chin to her forehead, almost covering her entire face. At first glance, it was a bit frightening, but Keaton's expression didn't change. He only frowned and asked her, "What happened?" Pearl already felt the allergy was ugly. Being mentioned by him, she immediately covered her face with the back of her hand. "I said don't look." Keaton was silent for a moment. He removed her hand, got off her, got out of bed, and turned on the room light. Pearl closed her eyes at the glaring light. Keaton walked to the cloakroom, put on a shirt, buttoning it while throwing her clothes to her. He said coldly, "Get up and change. I'm taking you to the hospital." 12:30 a.m. Pearl sat reluctantly in the passenger seat. She was still wearing her pajamas, too lazy to change. Orange pajamas with Hello Kitty patterns, hair falling on her shoulders, looking like she hadn't woken up yet. Keaton glanced at her and reminded, "Seatbelt." Pearl pursed her lips, buckling the seatbelt reluctantly. "I don't want to go to the hospital," she said with little confidence. Keaton held the steering wheel without speaking. His handsome, stern profile had no expression as he just drove towards the hospital. Pearl was a little afraid of him. She didn't dare say anything more, honestly fastened her seatbelt, and leaned her body far away from him. Private hospitals had fewer people in the early morning. Pearl sat in the consultation room chair, covering her eyes while blood was drawn, afraid to look. Keaton stood beside her, showing no intention of comforting her. It was hard to tell they were a couple married for 3 years. The blood test results came out quickly. During the wait, Pearl sat in the private hospital's VIP waiting room. The air conditioning was set a bit too low. Wearing only pajamas, she was cold. Keaton received a work call in the middle and went outside to talk, seemingly discussing an overseas project, speaking German she couldn't understand. Bored, Pearl stared at his reflection in the window. In the 3 years of marriage with Keaton, they rarely communicated. Most of the time it was in bed after he returned from business trips. Although she knew Keaton's personality had always been like this, overly cold, he used to have moments where he was very good and gentle to her. During her thoughts, the German outside stopped. It seemed the test results were out. "Did Mrs. Kingsley eat anything specific a few days ago?" the doctor asked. Pearl didn't dare say she was allergic to secretly taking birth control pills, afraid Keaton would get angry again. A blood test shouldn't be able to detect specifically what drug she was allergic to. Right, it should be a drug allergy. She heard the doctor outside say. After going back, ask Mrs. Kingsley to be careful. Apply ointment to the rash on her face, and it will be fine in a while. Pearl was inexplicably nervous. Fortunately, Keaton didn't say anything. His tone was unwavering as he said, "All right, thank you, doctor." The doctor seemed to leave. Footsteps approached the waiting room door, and the handle turned. Pearl pretended to be looking down at her phone. Keaton walked up to her, holding the test report and the medicine prescribed by the doctor. He took off his coat and draped it over her shoulders, saying faintly, "Let's go home." The coat carried the scent of his cold aftershave and the bitter disinfectant smell of the hospital. Pearl gave an "oh," turned off her phone, and followed behind him. The car was parked in the private hospital's underground garage. Keaton got in the car without speaking, nor did he ask what medicine she was allergic to. Pearl sat guiltily in the passenger seat, not daring to look at him, terrified that with one moment of eye contact, her little secret would be discovered by Keaton. Although after marriage, they hadn't discussed the issue of having children. And every time they did it, Keaton would definitely wear protection. But he never said he didn't want kids. But Pearl was only 25 this year, still young, and didn't want to have children so soon. She wasn't ready. The private hospital was very close to the villa area, and they arrived shortly. The lights hadn't been turned off when they left. As soon as Pearl entered, she saw Kitty lying on the bag she had casually thrown on the floor. This bag was a limited edition Hermes Kelly that Keaton brought back for her from a business trip to New York last month. Kitty's nails hadn't been trimmed for a while. Pearl ran over, picked up the chubby ragdoll cat, looked at the bag, and almost couldn't catch her breath. In just a short while, Kitty had actually used her Kelly bag as a scratching post. Seeming to sense the owner's mood, Kitty suddenly jumped away from Pearl and hid under the table. Pearl was angry at the cat and wanted to smack it. "Come over and take your medicine." Keaton stood by the western kitchen counter, poured a glass of water, placed it on the kitchen island, and spoke indifferently. "Oh," Pearl pursed her lips, carrying the medicine in the bag, walked to the island, and slowly opened the medicine box. Her movements were too dawdling. Her reluctance to take medicine was obvious. Keaton reached out, took the box from her hand, and popped out 2 pills. "Twice a day, take vitamin C and the allergy medicine together." His voice was cold and hard, and his tone lacked much warmth. His handsome features appeared indifferent and distant under the light of the kitchen. He seemed like a completely different person from the one holding and kissing her in bed not long ago. Sensing her gaze, he looked up at her. His eyes didn't hold much warmth as he placed the medicine on the island and said, "Go to sleep yourself after eating." "What about you?" Pearl held the medicine and asked him subconsciously. Keaton leaned against the island with one hand, not answering her, his face expressionless. He just looked at her calmly, appearing serious and indifferent, waiting for her to take the medicine. Pearl pursed her lips, didn't ask further, obediently picked them up and swallowed the pills. The medicine was bitter and astringent, almost rushing up her throat. She endured without making a sound, drank the whole glass of water, and opened her mouth for him to check. Finished. Keaton pinched her chin, actually checked, then gave a hum. He brushed his knuckles against her rash-covered face and said lightly, "Go to sleep." Pearl held back the urge to roll her eyes at him, gave an obedient "oh," took her phone, and went upstairs in her slippers. Pearl woke up very late the next day. Last night, after taking her medicine, she hugged Kitty and went upstairs to sleep. Keaton didn't return to the room in the middle of the night. It seemed he went to the company again. Usually, Keaton didn't allow the cat in their room, but Pearl only dared to sneak the cat onto the bed when he wasn't there. Kitty had been shedding seriously lately. When she woke up in the morning, there was a lot of cat hair floating in the room, making Pearl's nose itch and causing her to sneeze several times. She washed up, changed clothes, and went downstairs. The maid had already set breakfast on the dining table. Kitty treaded with cat steps, leisurely patrolling the house. Pearl saw the bag she had clearly placed on the sofa and covered with a blanket last night was dragged onto the carpet again, with a few more scratches from Kitty. She screamed. Kitty was scared by her, ears perking up, and instantly darted under the table. Auntie Flora came out of the kitchen, thinking something had happened. "What's wrong, Mrs. Kingsley?" Pearl picked up the bag that had been used as a scratching post, just about to lose her temper. Suddenly, she saw Keaton coming down from upstairs. He was wearing a dark gray shirt, his short, hard black hair was wet, and his face was handsome and deep. He looked like he had just finished exercising and was sweating. Hearing her voice, he lowered his gaze and looked towards her. Pearl didn't expect him to be home at this hour. If she lost her temper at Kitty and argued with the cat in front of him, he would definitely think she had a bad temper and was childish again. She took a deep breath, glared at Kitty, put the bag back on the sofa, and said dryly, "Nothing. Mr. Kingsley." Seeing Keaton, Auntie Flora called out, "Breakfast will be ready soon." Keaton looked indifferent, nodded in response, walked to the island and made himself coffee. His neck was lowered, his profile lines cold and sharp. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing a section of firm forearm. His wrist bone was cold white and distinct, knuckles clear. A black watch covered his wrist. His knuckles were thick, appearing very powerful. Pearl pushed his breakfast aside, planning to wait for him to come over. But Keaton had already put down the coffee cup and walked towards the stairs. "You're not eating," Pearl spoke subconsciously. Keaton didn't stop, nor did he look at her, just dropping a faint sentence, "I've eaten." Footsteps left, and the sound of a door closing came from the study upstairs. Pearl stared at the strawberry pancake she had specifically plated for him, stabbed it into a mush with her fork, and ate it in one bite. Keaton spent very little time at home. Even when he was there, he mostly stayed in the study dealing with work like today. Pearl hugged Kitty in the living room and played until she was covered in cat hair. Because of her allergy these past 2 days, she simply took leave and didn't go to the company. After playing with Kitty for a while, she took a few photos to post on her social media when her phone suddenly received a call. It was from Gwendolyn. Pearl's good mood instantly dissipated a bit, but she still answered the phone. "Hello, Mom, what's up? Did Keaton return to the country?" Gwendolyn asked directly on the other end. Almost all her calls were about Keaton. Pearl gave a hum. "Came back last night." Gwendolyn was a bit unhappy. "Then why didn't you say anything? Your brother-in-law's project progress has been stalled, just waiting for Keaton to come back. Your dad and I have told you so many times." Pearl held the phone, hugging Kitty a bit tighter without speaking. Since she married Keaton, Serena and Zinnia had both started their own families in the past 2 years. But the Fairchild family had obviously been going downhill these years, relying entirely on the Kingsley family's support. "Bring Keaton home for dinner this weekend," Gwendolyn said. Pearl gripped the phone, pursing her lips. "He's quite busy, might not have time." She didn't want to go back. "How busy can he be?" Gwendolyn said coldly on the other end. "How many times have you come home for dinner in the 3 years you've been married? Did you forget everything I told you when you got married? Pearl, is it that you don't want to come back, or that he doesn't have time?" Pearl squeezed the phone. Kitty suddenly bit her and forcibly ran away from her arms. "Fine, I'll talk to him." Gwendolyn didn't say anything more. Even the pleasantries seemed indifferent as she hung up directly. After hanging up, Pearl wasn't in the mood to post on social media anymore. She simply threw down her phone, went to the kitchen to ask Auntie Flora to cut some fruit, plated it, and carried it upstairs. She had never entered Keaton's study. They hadn't been married long, and when Keaton wasn't home, she rarely stayed at this villa. Too deserted, she didn't like it. Holding the fruit platter, Pearl reached out and knocked on the door. A cold voice came from inside. "Come in." Pearl pushed the door open. Keaton was sitting in front of the computer at his desk, wearing a Bluetooth headset, seemingly on a video call. He cast an indifferent glance over, but didn't speak to her. Pearl entered quietly and placed the fruit platter on his desk. His study was large, but the decor was simple. The tones were cold black, white, and gray, with only a wall of bookshelves and a large desk. Something the matter. Pearl originally saw he was in a meeting and felt it wasn't a good time to mention eating at the Fairchilds. But Keaton actively took off the Bluetooth headset and asked indifferently. She shook her head, looked at the computer on his desk, and whispered, "Did you finish your meeting?" Keaton looked stern, his tone flat. "Half-hour intermission." Pearl gave an "oh," relaxed a little, looked at him from the front of the desk, took 2 steps forward, and sat directly on his lap. Keaton looked up at her. His gaze remained cold, but he put down the documents in his hand, reached out to hold her waist to steady her on his lap, looked at her face for a while, and said casually, "What now?" Pearl was still wearing a homely white silk nightgown. Her black hair was loose over her shoulders. The red rash on her face was a bit better than last night, but it hadn't faded much. She shook her head, hugged his neck, acting a bit like a spoiled child, and just said, "Brought you something to eat." Keaton didn't show much expression. He glanced at the fruit she brought in on the table. His large palm supported her waist, his gaze lingering on her face for a while. He reached out and pinched her chin with 2 fingers, looking at the rash on her face. "What medicine caused the allergy?" His tone was indifferent, but he still asked. Pearl felt slightly guilty. Hugging his neck, her fingers unconsciously scratched at his shoulder. "Just vitamins." Her expression when lying was too obvious. Keaton looked at her for 2 seconds, rubbed his hand on her face, his dark eyes dimmed a few shades, but he wasn't angry. He just said, "Birth control pills." Pearl was stunned, staring at him with wide eyes, almost scared by his overly precise sensitivity. Looking at her expression, Keaton could almost be certain. "Didn't we take precautions?" His voice became a few degrees colder, but not much emotion could be heard. Pearl frowned and said guiltily, "I was afraid of an accident. You seemed to break it that day." Keaton looked at her for a while, steadied her on his lap. "Did you take the allergy medicine today?" Pearl hadn't taken it. The medicine was too bitter. She shook her head, hugging his neck. "The medicine is too bitter. I don't want to take it." Keaton held her and didn't say anything. He called towards the door, "Auntie Flora." Pearl paused and tried to get up from his lap. Keaton held her waist, not letting her move. Auntie Flora knocked and entered quickly. At a glance, she saw the 2 sitting intimately together but didn't say anything, just asked, "What is it?" Keaton said faintly, "Bring Mrs. Kingsley's medicine in and pour a glass of water." Auntie Flora nodded and said yes. Soon she brought the medicine and water in, placed them on the desk, and then closed the door and left. Keaton popped the pills out and handed them to Pearl with the water. "Don't want to." Pearl didn't take it, her arms firmly circling his neck without letting go. "Too bitter." Keaton put the water aside, lifted her chin with one hand, and looked at her face with obvious allergies. "If you don't take it, how long do you want to keep looking like this?" Pearl frowned. "You think I'm ugly." Keaton didn't have much expression on his face. He just picked up the medicine and said lightly, "I didn't say that." Pearl glared at him, a bit angry, but still held his wrist and swallowed the bitter pill from his palm. The tip of her tongue licked his palm, tickling a bit, like that ragdoll cat she raised. Keaton closed his palm without changing his expression and gave her the water. She scowled, drank a big mouthful, clearly actually bittered by it. She got down from his lap, ready to leave, forgetting even to mention the main business. Keaton pulled her back onto his lap, looked at her expressionlessly, and asked, "That bitter?" Pearl frowned. "Of course, you yourself didn't." Before she finished speaking, Keaton pinched her face and kissed her lips. Pearl was stunned, her face obviously flushing a bit. "What are you doing?" She touched her lips that had been kissed somewhat red. Keaton looked calm, rubbed his thumb on her lips, and said lightly, "Not that bitter." Pearl choked, hugged his neck, moved around on his lap. Are you going on a business trip this week? Keaton pressed his palm lightly against her back. Going to Hong Kong next week. Pearl's slender arms circled his neck, her tone carrying a hint of coquetry. Then come home with me for dinner this week. Keaton looked calm, revealing no emotion. We'll see. Pearl frowned, looking at his cold, indifferent face and pursed her lips. Go please, okay, hubby, she acted spoiled. Keaton didn't respond. His arms circled her waist, fixing her on his lap. He looked at her for a while and said, I need to continue the meeting. He said this, but didn't actually let go of her. Pearl glared at him, fully circled her hands behind his neck, looked down, cupped his face, and tried to kiss him like he did just now. Pearl's kissing skills were quite average. Her first kiss was taught by Keaton, but she wasn't a very teachable student and never seemed to learn. She kept her eyes open, wetly holding his lips, using her tongue to lick his teeth. While licking, she stared at him with beautiful eyes, seeming curious, yet a bit uncertain. Keaton's originally cold and waveless eyes began to change meaning. He pinched her waist and pulled her away a bit. Meeting starts in 20 minutes. Pearl squeezed him, pursing her lips and causing trouble on his trousers, bracing herself to say, Then are you going or not? Keaton stared at her, his breathing deepened. Pinching her waist, he lifted her up. Pearl flushed, cooperatively hooked one arm around his neck and reached down with the other to tug at his shirt. The nightgown lay wetly aside. Pearl's legs felt a bit weak. Keaton pushed too hard. Hands pressed on his shoulders, she thought several times she was going to die. But Keaton stopped promptly 1 minute before the meeting started. Before Pearl could stand steady, he had already put his headset back on and started the meeting with the Germans on the computer. Fortunately, he reluctantly agreed to return to the Fairchilds with her this weekend. Pearl took her clothes and left the study. Before leaving, she confirmed with him again about returning to the Fairchild home this weekend. Pearl dutifully took her medicine for 2 days, and the rash on her face soon almost disappeared. Although the company had changed owners, the project she was responsible for was still moving forward. It was one of the company's biggest projects this year, the design of the West City Golf Course. The person in charge asked her to prepare to coordinate with the bidding department, fix the design drawings in a few days, and send them over. Once the new boss arrived, they would be used to prepare the initial bid at the end of the month. On Friday, Pearl went to the company. When she left, Keaton hadn't left yet. Pearl didn't tell him about going to work. When the car stopped at the intersection, he saw her from the window standing by the roadside, seemingly waiting for a car. Mrs. Kingsley is over there. Should I drive over? The driver asked from the front. Keaton rolled down the window, looked out and called her, Pearl. Pearl was looking down, seemingly looking at her phone. Hearing the voice, she didn't react immediately, until Keaton's car stopped beside her. Get in, Keaton spoke. Pearl pursed her lips, went around the car, and got in on the other side. Going to the company? Keaton glanced at her and asked. Pearl nodded. MN. Keaton didn't know much about her work. Gwendolyn was an architecture professor at Beijing University, so Pearl almost had no other options for her major. After graduation, she entered an architectural firm introduced by Gwendolyn. However, after a big fight with Gwendolyn at the end of last year, she jumped ship to a new company. He was busy with mergers and acquisitions abroad at the time and didn't ask in detail. Which company? He lowered his head, scrolling through the tablet in his hand, and asked casually. Von Schning, Pearl replied seriously. Keaton's hand paused for a moment, and he turned his face to look at her. The driver driving in front also glanced at the couple in the back seat through the rearview mirror. What's wrong? Pearl didn't notice anything amiss. Keaton closed the tablet, shook his head, and said faintly, Nothing. Go to Von Schning first, he said to the driver in front. Von Schning was an internationally famous architectural firm. Its domestic headquarters was in Beijing, famous for being hard to enter. Especially early this year, after Von Schning's head office in Manhattan was acquired and the owner changed, the company's interview threshold went up a notch, making it even harder to get in. Because Gwendolyn was an architecture professor at Beijing University, Pearl naturally studied architectural design in university. She studied for her master's in Paris for 2 years, but she wasn't very ambitious. She had no passion for architecture. So, although she had officially entered the industry for a year or two, because she was too slack, She basically hadn't participated in any major design projects. The golf course project in hand was strongly recommended to her by her senior, Sylvia Art, and it was also the biggest project she had encountered so far. Keaton dropped her off downstairs at the company. Before getting out, she thought of something and couldn't help reminding him, "Remember to come home with me for dinner." Keaton sat in the car compartment, looked at her, didn't respond, and just rolled up the window. Pearl watched the driver drive the car away, stared at the spot for a while, curled her lip, and walked towards the company. As soon as Pearl arrived at the office, before she could sit down, Zoe at the next desk winked at her. She hadn't been at this company long, only half a year. She didn't know many people, just Zoe in the same department. Sitting at her desk, she turned on the computer and checked the company group chat first. Sure enough, there was a notification of a new message. The headquarters acquisition process at the beginning of the year had been completed, and the new boss would come to the company next week. Pearl didn't care much about this. The arrival of a new boss wouldn't have much impact on her work. Last week's design proposal was returned again. Pearl revised the design draft at the company and submitted it again. Before getting off work, Gwendolyn asked her again on the phone when she and Keaton would arrive tonight. Pearl messaged Keaton again to confirm the time. Keaton didn't reply. As soon as work ended, she immediately called a car, planning to go home first. Downstairs, Keaton's message suddenly came back, "In your company's underground garage." Pearl paused, surprised he would actively come to pick her up, but still headed towards the underground garage. The garage lighting was a bit dim, and she wasn't very familiar with Keaton's car, so she didn't find it for a long time. Just as she prepared to call him, the headlights of a black G-Wagon in front flashed. Pearl raised her hand to shield her eyes and saw the black G-Wagon drive a bit closer to her. The driver's window rolled down. Keaton sat in the driver's seat, looked at her from the car, his profile appearing somewhat cold and hard. He raised his brow slightly, signaling her to get in. Pearl pursed her lips, checked his license plate number, memorized it, and then opened the passenger door to get in. It got dark earlier in Beijing in late August. There was a traffic jam on the road. Pearl, worried that Gwendolyn would be anxious, sent her a message. Keaton sat in the driver's seat driving, his profile sharp and structured, brow bone distinct, showing little emotion. Every time Pearl went back to the Fairchilds, with him for dinner, the atmosphere was stagnant. It felt like his already unsociable demeanor became even more intense. But it was understandable. No one would be happy being leeched off. She scooted to the side, opened the window, and let some fresh air in. It was rush hour, and the windows of several cars nearby were also open. Pearl's eyes met a little girl in the car opposite. A curly-haired little girl, looking mixed race, with round eyes, staring curiously at Pearl. Pearl thought she was cute too and made a funny face at her. The little girl immediately laughed. Pearl couldn't help smiling too, but the next second she saw the little girl seem to see something and shyly rolled up the window. Pearl froze slightly. Turning her head, Keaton, who was driving beside her, had looked over at some point and was looking at her with no emotion. Pearl rolled up the window and sat properly back against the seat. "Since when did you like children?" Keaton looked back at the road ahead and asked plainly. Pearl shook her head, looking at him somewhat inexplicably. "I don't. I just thought that little girl just now was pretty." Keaton turned his face, stared at her for a while, and said expressionlessly, "I thought you wanted to have one." Pearl paused, looking as if she heard something terrifying, shaking her head repeatedly. "Can you not say such terrifying things?" Keaton looked at her expression, no emotion visible on his clear, cold face, and said nothing more. It was already dark when they arrived at the Fairchilds. Gwendolyn had long asked the maid to stew soup. Keaton parked outside, and Pearl entered first. Franklin and Gwendolyn were waiting for them on the sofa. Pearl entered and greeted them first, "Mom, Dad." Gwendolyn stood up immediately, "Just you." "Where's Keaton?" She looked behind Pearl. Pearl walked to the kitchen island to pour water and didn't answer immediately. "You child," seeing Franklin's face look unpleasant, Gwendolyn walked over immediately. Footsteps came from the door. Keaton entered carrying things for Gwendolyn and Franklin. "Keaton?" Gwendolyn's face changed immediately. "I thought Pearl didn't invite you along again." Keaton showed little emotion on his face. He just put down the things he bought and greeted them coldly and distantly. "Dad, Mom." Pearl leaned against the island drinking water, watching the few people who instantly became obsequious and secretly rolled her eyes. Keaton didn't go to the dining table immediately. His gaze glanced towards the island, just in time to catch her eye roll before she could take it back. Pearl pretended nothing happened and walked towards the dining table. The table was filled almost entirely with dishes Keaton loved. Pearl barely touched her chopsticks, just burying her head stuffing rice into her mouth. Keaton glanced at her and quietly placed a plate of stir-fried asparagus with meat in front of her. Pearl paused and looked up at him. Keaton looked calm. While talking to Franklin, he put the peeled shrimp in his hand into her bowl. The meal didn't last long. Franklin and Keaton went to the study upstairs. Pearl helped the maid clear the dishes to the kitchen. Pearl, Gwendolyn was arranging her flowers by the window and called her over. Pearl washed her hands, walked to her side, and looked at the cut flower branches on the table. Gwendolyn was in her 50s this year, a doctoral supervisor at Beijing University's School of Architecture. She was well-maintained with clear and beautiful features, but her temperament wasn't gentle. Instead, she had a sharp feeling. Franklin's company reaching this stage today was largely due to Gwendolyn. "Pass me the scissors," Gwendolyn said to her in a gentle tone. Pearl took the scissors, pointing the sharp end towards herself. Gwendolyn didn't look, reached out and took the scissors directly. Her finger was scratched. But Pearl didn't make a sound. "You've been married to Keaton for almost 3 years. When do you plan to have children?" Gwendolyn asked while cutting flower branches. Pearl's movement stiffened. "No plans yet," Gwendolyn frowned. "You don't want to, or he doesn't want to?" She looked at her. It was clearly a gentle and calm inquiry, but Pearl felt a nervousness of being questioned and interrogated for no reason. It seemed like it had been this way since childhood. Gwendolyn was a good mother. Serena and Zinnia were treated well, but only towards her there was always an indescribable sense of distance. But she had indeed never truly mistreated her. She just didn't smile at her, never hugged her, or got close to her. For a long time, Pearl didn't know why. She thought Gwendolyn hated her. But how could a mother hate her daughter? Until she was 13, she accidentally found out. She wasn't Franklin's daughter, but a child Gwendolyn accidentally had with another man after marriage. Originally, she shouldn't have existed, but Gwendolyn physically couldn't withstand an abortion, so she was born. But Gwendolyn loathed that man and loathed her along with him. The cut on the fingertip from the scissors was small, but it hurt. Pearl seemed to smell the scent of blood. "I haven't asked him." She lowered her head, looking at the well-trimmed bonsai in her peripheral vision. The scissors were sharp when cutting the branches. Gwendolyn looked at her, her expression somewhat cold, like looking at a bonsai plant that couldn't be trimmed well no matter what. "You have to plan these things yourself. You're not young anymore. Your dad and I don't know why Keaton married you, but since you, as a daughter of the Fairchild family, were able to marry into the Kingsley family, you should know certain things in your heart." Pearl didn't speak, nor did she know what to say. She didn't know why Keaton married her either, nor did she know what she should know in her heart. "Not talking again?" Gwendolyn frowned, looking at her displeased. Pearl pinched her bleeding fingertip, looked up at her, and said, "Got it." Some noise came from upstairs. Keaton had finished talking and came down from the study. "Finished talking?" Gwendolyn put down the scissors, walked over, and asked with a smile. Pearl stood still, looking down at her scratched fingertip. Gwendolyn seemed to be saying something to Keaton. She didn't go over, just walked to the kitchen faucet and rinsed the blood off her fingertip. Leaving the Fairchilds, Gwendolyn walked them out and gave a few more instructions. Pearl responded perfunctorily and walked to the car first. When she looked down to fasten her seatbelt, Keaton noticed something wrong with her hand posture and asked, "What's wrong with your hand?" Pearl pursed her lips and shook her head. "Nothing, accidentally scratched it." Keaton glanced at her, didn't speak, just reached out and grabbed her hand. A scratch the size of a fingernail, not big, but on the tenderest part. "How did this happen?" His expression was calm as he took out the first aid kit from the car to disinfect it for her. "Accidentally scratched," Pearl said quietly, looking down at him. From her perspective, she could clearly see his face. The line from his brow bone to the bridge of his nose was sharp and deep. His dark eyelashes were lowered, his expression looking serious and focused. Keaton was strange. Sometimes he was very good and gentle to her. Sometimes he was fierce and unkind. Pearl thought of what Gwendolyn said earlier. Why did he marry her? Actually, she didn't know either. Keaton applied the medicine and bandaged it with a band-aid. "Don't get it wet tonight." "Amen." Pearl looked at him, nodded, and said, "Thanks." Keaton glanced at her, closed the kit, said nothing, and continued driving. It was very late when they got home. Pearl was very careful when showering, worried about getting it wet. When she came out of the bathroom, Keaton had finished showering and was sitting on the edge of the bed looking at documents on a tablet. Pearl walked over, picked up her phone charging on the nightstand, and prepared to go around to the other side to sleep. "The kit is on the side. Change the dressing yourself," Keaton reminded her without looking up. Pearl paused, looked at her fingertip, which was slightly whitened from soaking. The wound was much better, almost healed. "No need, it's almost healed," she said. Keaton put down the tablet and looked up at her. Pearl thought he didn't believe her, so she showed him her hand. "Look." Keaton didn't speak. Holding her wrist, he pulled her directly onto his lap. Pearl froze. Her face, fresh from the shower, was still a bit red. Keaton brushed her hair aside, pinched her chin, and started kissing her very closely. A kiss that was a bit overly gentle. Pearl tugged at the collar of his bathrobe, a little nervous. Keaton looked at her, watching her expression while kissing, held her on his lap, and peeled off her bathrobe. Pearl sat on his lap and reached out to turn off the light. Wet, hot breath and kisses fell on her shoulders and neck. Pearl suddenly thought of what Gwendolyn said in the evening, pressed his shoulder, and reminded, "Need to wear a condom." Keaton's palm held her waist, put her arms around his neck, turned his face to look at her, and deliberately said, "Ran out." Pearl frowned, her face a bit red. "No, I don't want to get pregnant." Keaton kissed her cheek, placed his palm on her soft, moist abdomen, pressed maliciously. "Why?" Pearl turned her face away, but was turned back by him. Keaton looked at her eyes in the darkness, seemingly trying to see something in her face. But after gazing for a few seconds, he raised his hand, took out an unopened new box from the drawer of the nightstand, kissed her while stuffing the box into her hand, saying, "Put it on yourself." The most harmonious thing with Keaton was their sex life. Pearl sometimes even felt that perhaps he married her simply because he liked her face and body. But Serena and Zinnia were also beautiful. Kissed into a daze, she couldn't help thinking, does Keaton just like my type? Seeming to sense her distraction. Keaton deliberately bit her hard. Pearl snapped back, held his neck, and cooperatively kissed him back. No need to go to the company on the weekend, but the previously rejected design draft had to be redrawn. Pearl checked a lot of information at home and made 2 new concept drafts. She handed in the plan directly when she went to the company on Monday. They were building a resort project. Pearl was responsible for the golf course part. There were already several good golf courses in Beijing. If there were not many highlights in the design, there wouldn't be much advantage in implementation after passing. However, wondering if it was an illusion, the office was very quiet all morning. Even Zoe, who usually slacked off the most, was honestly at her desk. Pearl worked on the design for a while, got up to go to the pantry to make coffee. Zoe watched her leave and followed. "What are you doing?" Pearl looked at her mysterious look and couldn't help asking. Zoe made coffee and looked towards the office. "The new boss comes to the company today." Pearl didn't care much, just gave an O and put sugar in her coffee. Zoe saw her unconcerned look. "You're not curious?" Pearl shook her head. "Not curious." She wasn't a very curious person. Von Schning changing bosses wouldn't affect her, a mere employee, much. Zoe, however, was very interested. "I heard our new boss is very young." She paused, leaned closer, and said exaggeratedly, "and very handsome." Pearl lowered her head to drink coffee, not caring much, just asked, "How handsome?" Zoe had a mysterious look. "That I don't know. Maybe we can see him during the big meeting later." Von Schning had a regular meeting every Monday. Pearl didn't take it to heart. After finishing her coffee, she returned to her desk, turned on the computer, and continued fixing the design. The company meeting was at 3 p.m. on the 17th floor. Pearl received a temporary return of the draft. Not going up first with Zoe, she revised the plan at her desk before going to the elevator to go upstairs. The elevators had a wait time, and the meeting was about to start. Just as she was anxious about what to do, the exclusive elevator next to it lit up, seeming to go down. Pearl reached out and pressed the elevator button, thinking the new boss must have already gone up by now, so sneaking a use would be fine. The elevator door opened from the inside. She saw Keaton standing in the elevator at a glance, with Simon Song and several company executives beside him. Pearl was slightly stunned. Keaton obviously saw her at a glance too. He was wearing a dark gray suit, his brows cold and sharp. His broad shoulders almost blocked the people behind him. His features were deep and structured, appearing particularly eye-catching among a group of people also in dark suits. Pearl absolutely didn't expect to see him here, just holding her documents staring at him blankly. Keaton, however, looked calm, looked at her expressionlessly, raised his hand to hold the closing elevator door. Not coming in? The design department director knew Pearl. He frowned first, but seeing Keaton still say nothing, he kept quiet. Pearl braced herself and entered the elevator, standing next to Keaton. The floor button was already pressed, 17th floor. Pearl stared at the slowly rising numbers above, thinking of what Zoe said in the morning, and the elevator full of executives right now. She had pretty much guessed that the new boss heir dropped into the company should be Keaton. Reaching the floor, Pearl didn't wait for the company executives to leave first. She bumped Keaton's shoulder and walked quickly out of the elevator. "Mr. Kingsley, this is Little Fang from our design department. She hasn't been here long, please excuse her," the design director said somewhat awkwardly. Keaton looked indifferent, showing little emotion on his face. "It's fine." The first meeting of the new boss's airdrop, everyone in the company took it seriously, and enthusiasm was more than a little higher than before. Pearl was a bit absent-minded throughout the meeting. Zoe and several female colleagues were quite excited, discussing gossip about Keaton until the meeting ended. "Do you think he's married?" Zoe asked another female colleague on the side. Pearl stood in the corner of the elevator, distracted. "Probably. He mentioned being married in an interview before." Pearl lowered her head, silently looking at her own reflection on the floor beneath her feet. Who's his wife? Rich and handsome, marrying such a man must be too happy. Another female colleague gossiped. "I heard it's an arranged marriage, those kinds of families." "Arranged marriage, then there's likely no affection." Pearl didn't participate in the topic, nor did she express any opinion. When the elevator reached the office floor, Zoe looked at her. "I said the new boss is handsome, right? What do you think?" Pearl nodded perfunctorily. "Handsome." Getting off work in the evening, Pearl turned off her computer and was just about to pick up her bag and leave. Her phone suddenly rang. Keaton sent a message, just one sentence. "Waiting for you in the underground garage." There were too many cars in the company's underground garage. Pearl looked for a while before seeing that familiar black Bentley. She pursed her lips, subconsciously looked around, opened the rear door, and climbed into the car. Keaton sat in the back seat, laptop on his knees, processing work. He didn't look at her, only saying to the driver in front, "Drive." The car drove out of the underground garage, but not in the direction of home. Pearl couldn't help turning her head to look at him. "Where are we going? Not going home?" Keaton's face appeared indifferent and sharp in the dim light of the car compartment, holding little warmth. "Dinner." His tone was flat. He closed the laptop on his knees and said lightly, "Auntie Flora took leave tonight." Pearl gave an "oh" and leaned back against the seat. "Nothing you want to ask," Keaton said faintly. Pearl pursed her lips, straightened slightly. "You acquired von Schning?" Keaton nodded. "MN, early this year." Pearl stared at him, a bit annoyed. "Why didn't you say so earlier? If I knew you were my boss, I would have changed companies." Keaton looked at her face, slightly raising an eyebrow. "Did you ask me?" Pearl exhaled deeply, turned away not to look at him, and just said sullenly, "I'll resign after the golf course project ends." Keaton looked indifferent. "You choose your job based on who the boss is?" Pearl didn't look at him, just staring out the car window. "You're not me. Why don't you let me be your boss?" Keaton smiled without emotion. "You can try." Pearl secretly rolled her eyes at the car window. Keaton's voice was faint. "I can see that." Pearl pretended not to hear and ignored him. The restaurant was a private dining club in the workers' stadium area. Pearl originally had no appetite, but the Cantonese cuisine made by the restaurant's chef unexpectedly suited her taste. She had been an exchange student in Hong Kong during university. Keaton was from Hong Kong, and Auntie Flora usually cooked mostly Cantonese dishes at home, so the couple's tastes had slowly drifted towards being the same. After dinner, Keaton went out to take a work call. Pearl sat in the private room playing on her phone, incidentally browsing YouTube for some new designs, wanting to see if she could optimize the design proposal. "Mr. Kingsley, what a coincidence, didn't expect to see you here." Some noise came from outside, seemed like Keaton's friends. Pearl frowned and stood up to look out. Keaton was talking to someone outside, walking towards their private room while talking. Somewhat unfamiliar faces. She didn't recognize them. Pearl looked around the room, worried they would come in. If they bumped into each other, explaining her identity would be awkward. She grabbed her bag and phone and went into the restroom inside the private room. After a while, the voices outside seemed to disappear. The people seemed to have left. Pearl leaned against the restroom door, just about to open it and go out. The restroom door was pulled open from the outside first. Keaton stood at the door, looking down at her. "What are you doing?" Pearl was still clutching her bag, speaking very naturally. "Didn't your friends come?" Keaton had little expression on his face, just looked at her. "So you hid," Pearl nodded. "MN, afraid it would be hard for you to explain." Keaton looked at her and smiled. "What do I need to explain?" Looking at her, holding the door frame of the restroom, calling her word by word, "Mrs. Kingsley." Pearl paused, feeling he seemed a bit angry. "Aren't we keeping the marriage secret? If your friends saw—" "When did I say secret marriage?" Keaton raised his eyebrows, interrupting her. Pearl was clearly stunned. "Huh?" Keaton looked calm, lowered his eyes to her face, took the bag from her hand, took her hand, slowly held it and gripped it tight. "Pearl, I never said I wanted a secret marriage." Because of Keaton's words, Pearl didn't sleep well all night. They registered their marriage in Hong Kong. A few days after registering, Keaton went on a business trip to Singapore. For most of these 3 years, he had been busy with work. The two hadn't held a wedding yet. Apart from the Kingsley family's help to the Fairchild family in business, their marriage basically hadn't been made public. But now he suddenly said he didn't intend to hide the marriage. But Pearl was almost used to this kind of friends, with benefits like marital relationship. Not making it public, she didn't have the burden of being Mrs. Kingsley. Even if they divorced in the future, it would be convenient. The next morning, waking up with dark circles under her eyes to eat breakfast, Pearl took the design draft she revised again and prepared to go out to hail a taxi to the company. "The driver is outside." Keaton picked up his coat and stopped her. "Let's go to the company together." Pearl shook her head. "I'll take a taxi myself." Keaton paused, looked at her. "What do you mean?" Pearl answered truthfully. "Don't want to be seen." Keaton didn't speak, just looked at her for a while, slightly raised an eyebrow. "You take the car, I'll drive myself." Pearl froze. "No need, I can go by my—" Before she finished, Keaton had already taken the car keys and walked towards the garage. Pearl walked to the door. The driver stood by the car door holding it open for her. "Mrs. Kingsley." Pearl glanced at the garage. Keaton had already left first in that black G-Wagon. Going out 10 minutes later than usual, there was a bit of traffic on the road. When she arrived at the company, it was time to clock in. Just as Pearl sat down at her desk, she was called to the office. Their design department didn't have many projects this quarter. The golf course project in hand was one of the company's few big projects this year. "I've looked at the drafts you revised. There are highlights, but the teeing ground and putting green area still have some issues." The department manager was Pearl's university senior, Sylvia Art. Pearl was poached to this company by Sylvia. "Okay, I'll look at it again later." Pearl held the design draft, turned to leave. "Wait!" Sylvia stopped her, pulled 2 books from the shelf for her. "Look at these when you go back. Also, are you free next weekend?" Pearl took the books and nodded. "Should be." Sylvia sat in the office chair. "Then come out with me next weekend. Let's go to the Pine Hill course for a site visit, see if we can use it as a reference." Pearl nodded. "Okay." Leaving the office, Pearl returned to her desk and continued processing the design drawings. Zoe forwarded her a few gossip chats from the company group. She wasn't interested originally, just clicked to glance casually, but it was actually about Keaton. The design draft in hand wasn't finished. Pearl didn't plan to look, but out of curiosity, couldn't help clicking into that gossip. It was actually gossip rumors about Keaton during his study at University College London. Pearl knew almost nothing about his time studying abroad. Those few years were when their relationship was at its worst, almost freezing point. She opened the message, looked for a few seconds, and closed it. Zoe Private messaged her. "Did you see? Didn't expect our boss to be a romantic. Do you think his girlfriend back then regrets it? Actually dumping him voluntarily." Pearl stared at the popping words on the computer screen, feeling her thoughts were a bit numb, but still typed back. Don't know, maybe. Before leaving work on Friday, Pearl's design draft finally passed the initial review temporarily, but further modifications would wait until after the bidding meeting. Thinking of the appointment with Sylvia to visit Pine Hill Golf Course this weekend, Pearl planned to buy a set of golf clothes after work. Keaton's driver had been picking her up for work these days. She felt a bit embarrassed robbing Keaton of his driver. Before closing her computer to leave work, she called the driver saying not to pick her up. She was going to shop at the mall after work. The driver said okay. Pearl packed her things, left the company, and went directly to the mall building opposite to buy clothes. After trying 2 sets, she hadn't decided which one to buy. Her phone suddenly rang. It was a call from Keaton. She held the clothes in the fitting room and still answered the call. "Where are you?" Keaton asked straightforwardly on the other end. Pearl stood in front of the mirror looking at the dress. "Mall opposite." "Why?" Keaton seemed to pause on the phone. "Which store? I'm coming to find you." Pearl took the clothes out of the fitting room and gave them to the sales associate. "I've bought them." Keaton ignored that sentence and just repeated. "Which store?" Pearl looked up at the brand logo in the store and gave the name. Keaton arrived quickly. Pearl was trying another skirt, opening the fitting room door to come out, just in time to see him. The sales associate beside was getting him water. He wore a simple silver-gray shirt, tie hanging loosely around his neck. The top 2 buttons of the shirt were undone, revealing his Adam's apple. Wearing the skirt, Pearl walked over naturally, spun around in front of him, and asked him, "Does it look good?" Keaton looked up at her, expression showing nothing unusual, gaze stopping on her face for 2 seconds. "Going to play golf?" Pearl gave a hum, turning to look at the clothes in the mirror. She was wearing a blue and white outfit. The skirt just passed the root of her thigh. Her legs were white and straight, looking very youthful and energetic. "This set then." Pearl liked it quite a bit, asking the associate to wrap it up. Keaton handed over the card, glanced at the sets she tried earlier aside. "Wrap them all up." Pearl sat down next to him, picked up the water he hadn't drunk, opened it, and drank. "Why buy so many?" Keaton glanced at her and said faintly, "Didn't you say they look good?" Pearl paused, embarrassed by his words, held the water and coughed lightly, saying somewhat unnaturally, "Why were you looking for me?" The associate went to wrap clothes. Only the 2 of them were left in the lounge. Keaton said faintly, "My parents came to Beijing. Let's go have dinner together." "What?" Pearl almost choked on the water, getting her clothes wet. Keaton looked at her calmly, pulled a tissue, and handed it to her. Pearl wiped the water off her clothes hurriedly. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Keaton looked plain, slightly raised an eyebrow. "You didn't ask." Pearl glared at him, put down the water, and went into the fitting room to change. Keaton's parents lived in Hong Kong year-round. When Pearl was an exchange student in Hong Kong during university, because of Gwendolyn, her relationship with Keaton's mother, Rose, was quite good. Before her relationship with Keaton deteriorated, Rose often invited her to the Kingsley home. The motherly love she never felt from Gwendolyn, she experienced with Rose. When she married Keaton, Rose was the happiest among the 2 families. Keaton parked the car outside the restaurant. Before getting out, Pearl dug out lipstick from her bag and specifically touched up her makeup. The private room was booked. The waiter led them upstairs. Walking along the Chinese-style corridor, Pearl's expression was obviously not happy. Every time the 2 families ate together, the topics were always the same few things, either urging them to have kids or asking when they would. Keaton glanced sideways at her and said faintly, "Just a simple meal." Pearl glanced at him and didn't speak much. He wasn't the one being pressured. Aside from not wearing a condom, he didn't have to worry about anything else. Keaton seemed to sense her gaze, lowering his eyes to look towards her. Pearl looked calm, averting her gaze. "What did you curse me for?" He slightly raised an eyebrow and asked faintly. Pearl said innocently, "Who cursed you?" She looked at him, deadpan serious. "Can you not be so sensitive?" Keaton didn't speak, glanced at her coldly, reached out and pushed open the door of the private room ahead. "Keaton is here. Pearl, sit here by me." In the private room, Rose and Lawrence Kingsley had already arrived. Gwendolyn and Franklin were also there. The families were old friends. Although not in the same city, they met for dinner regularly every year. Keaton mostly settled in Beijing these years. When busy, Sometimes, even on Lunar New Year's Eve, he was abroad. Pearl greeted everyone and sat down next to Rose. Gwendolyn looked at her, said nothing, just smiled and asked the waiter to serve the dishes. Franklin and Lawrence were chatting. They must have smoked. There was a clear smell of tobacco in the room. Keaton walked to the French window and opened the door to let the smoke out. "Keaton, see if there's anything else needed." Gwendolyn spoke from the side. Pearl sat next to the position beside Rose, looking down, drinking plain water on the table. Keaton naturally pulled out the chair beside her, sat down next to her, and handed her the ordering tablet. Pearl paused and looked up at him. Keaton looked calm. "Order what you want." Pearl pursed her lips, subconsciously glancing at Gwendolyn opposite. Gwendolyn said nothing, just smiling faintly. "Why look at me? Order if he tells you to." Pearl didn't speak again, swiped a few times on the tablet, ordered a few dishes she liked, and whispered to Keaton, "What are you eating?" Keaton was chatting about work with Lawrence, lowered his eyes to glance at her. "You decide." Pearl said no more, added 2 more dishes, and gave the tablet to the waiter beside. Dishes began to arrive slowly. Pearl lowered her head to eat the sweet soup she ordered, half listening to the family's chat. Why didn't Jiang Li come along? Gwendolyn chatted with Rose. Jiang Li was Keaton's sister. Since her divorce 2 years ago, she had been running around everywhere, seemingly working on some art museum. Rose shook her head somewhat helplessly. Who knows, can't control her at all. She returned to Hong Kong a while ago, then disappeared again. Although complaining, her tone was full of affection. Gwendolyn smiled and followed up, "Serena and Zinnia are the same. Once married, their hearts aren't with us anymore." Pearl lowered her head eating, pretending not to understand the meaning in Gwendolyn's words. "Pour me a glass of water," Keaton suddenly said. Pearl paused, looked up at him, puzzled. "Can't you pour it yourself?" Keaton didn't speak, gave her a deep look, directly picked up her water glass, and drank the remaining water in her cup. Pearl froze for a few seconds, looking at the empty glass, frowned and glared at him, but dared not scold him in front of both parents, only stepping hard on his foot under the table. Keaton pressed her knee from under the table without changing expression, placed the empty glass in front of her, turned to the waiter beside and said, "Please remove this dish, change it to non-spicy." Pearl was slightly stunned, looking at the boiled pork slices she casually ordered just now placed in front of him. Suddenly realized, Keaton seemed unable to eat spicy food. The meal lasted until almost 10 o'clock before ending. Coming out of the private room, everyone's cars were parked at the entrance. Rose and Lawrence returned to the hotel first. They had a flight back to Hong Kong tomorrow morning. However, Franklin and Gwendolyn's car had some issues. Keaton let them take his car first. With both parents gone, Pearl visibly sighed in relief, but it was a bit late now, and it wasn't easy to get a taxi in this alley area. "How do we get back?" She looked at Keaton beside her. Keaton glanced at her, seemingly in no rush at all, just took off his suit jacket, revealing the white shirt inside, and said, "Walk back." His attitude was casual, holding his suit jacket as he walked forward. Pearl looked down at the high heels on her feet, reasonably suspecting he was intentionally retaliating for that wrongly ordered boiled pork slices just now. She followed. Keaton didn't wait for her, just walking forward along the roadside. In Beijing near 11 p.m., the streetlights were bright, with cars occasionally passing by. Pearl limped behind him in high heels. After walking for a while, her feet were really uncomfortable, and she was unwilling to walk anymore, simply squatting on the spot without moving. Keaton continued walking, seeming to sense she wasn't following, stopped, and looked back. Pearl squatted on the ground with zero image, glaring at him from a distance. Keaton didn't come over, just stood under the street lamp ahead holding his suit jacket looking at her. He was tall, his figure straight and slender. A handsome, stern face under the dim yellow light. Simple white shirt and black trousers were worn with style by him, carrying a temperament of a Hong Kong male star from the last century, cold yet gentle. Staring at her for a while, he seemed to compromise first, walking towards Pearl and stopping in front of her. Pearl hugged her knees, ignoring him, not getting up either. "Can you stand up yourself?" His voice fell on top of her head, carrying his usual distance, but without any impatience. Pearl pursed her lips, looked up at him. Her gaze only landed on his white shirt with 2 buttons undone, tie loose, revealing a prominent Adam's apple and the cold, handsome jawline. "Legs are numb," she said sullenly. Keaton didn't speak, just looked at her for a while, handing her the suit jacket in his hand. Pearl didn't take it immediately, asking him, "What for?" Keaton didn't speak, just raised his wrist to look at his watch, saying, "The driver will arrive in 10+ minutes." A car drove past them, bringing a gust of wind that blew up the broken hair on his forehead, revealing a full, sharp brow bone. His dark, deep eyes showed a gratuitous, indifferent gentleness in the night. He stuffed the jacket into her hands, turned his back, bent his knees slightly, and said to her, "Get on, I'll carry you." Pearl held his suit jacket, stunned for a few seconds. Looking at the broad, solid shoulders in front of her, she hesitated, then slowly climbed up. Keaton was tall, his shoulders broad, and due to regular workouts, he picked her up easily. Pearl nervously grabbed his shoulders, arms tightly circling his neck. "Don't drop me." Keaton didn't reply to this, just supported her with one hand, took a few steps forward, and said lightly, "Squeeze any tighter and we'll fall to death together." Pearl loosened her grip on his neck a little, but pressed tighter against his back, whispering, "I didn't mean to." Keaton supported her steadily and powerfully, eyes watching the road ahead, just said, "Shoes uncomfortable. Want to take them off?" Pearl was still wearing stilettos, dangling by his trousers. Hearing this, she nodded and said, "Yes." Keaton stopped slightly, still carrying her, said to her, "Foot." Pearl cocked her foot forward, pressing against the side of his waist abdomen. Streetlights on both sides cast flickering shadows, reflecting the crabapple trees beside the path. The air was mixed with warm, humid fresh air. Keaton lowered his head slightly, took off her high heels with one hand, and held them. Once the shoes were off, her insteps felt instantly relieved. Pearl couldn't help wiggling her bare feet, lying on his back. "Thanks." Keaton didn't speak. Supporting her with one hand and carrying her heels in the other, he carried her and continued walking along the night road. Walking for nearly 20 minutes, the driver's car finally arrived. It was late when they got home. Several sets of golf outfits bought during the afternoon shopping were placed on the living room sofa. Pearl remembered the site visit to the course tomorrow and went upstairs to shower first. Coming out of the bathroom after showering, Keaton had already taken the clothes from the sofa to the bedroom cloakroom. "Going to play golf?" Keaton stood at the cloakroom door, undoing his tie while talking to her sideways. "No." Pearl bent over looking for the hairdryer, hair still wet. "Don't I have a golf course project in hand?" Several drafts had issues. Manager Sylvia said to go to Pine Hill Course tomorrow for a site visit. Keaton paused in unbuttoning his shirt, looking sideways at her. "Pine Hill Course? MN." Pearl bent over looking for the hairdryer, absent-minded. "Aren't there only those few courses in Beijing?" She found the hairdryer, walked to the head of the bed to dry her hair. Her hair had grown too long recently. It took a long time to dry every time she washed it. Keaton came out of the cloakroom, glanced at the person sitting on the edge of the bed looking irritable while drying hair, walked behind her, and took the hairdryer from her hand. Pearl immediately gave him the hairdryer, leaning comfortably back against the bed, letting him dry it for her. Keaton had helped her dry her hair many times in the years of marriage. His technique was quite skilled. Hot air whirring against her cheeks made her drowsy. Pearl closed her eyes, feeling a strand of hair brushing past the tip of her nose, ticklish. She reached out to grab it, but grabbed nothing. Maybe Kitty secretly opened the door into the bedroom again recently, but the tip of her nose was still ticklish. "What's wrong?" Noticing her movement, Keaton turned off the hairdryer. "Cat hair." Pearl got up, leaned closer to him, face very close to his. "Get it off for me." She closed her eyes, leaning defenselessly towards Keaton. Eyelashes thick and black, nose tip perky. The skin on her face was thin and white, so clear one could almost see the fine fuzz on it. There were faint green-pink capillaries on her eyelids. Keaton looked at her, gaze lingering on her face for a while. He reached out and scraped her nose tip, taking off that very fine white cat hair, then said lightly, "Gone." Pearl wrinkled her nose. Obviously sleepy and too lazy to move, she simply leaned directly on his shoulder, letting him continue drying her hair. Keaton brushed the hair off her shoulder, turned the hairdryer back on, and while drying her hair asked, "Sylvia Art sent you to Pine Hill tomorrow." Pearl was almost sitting in his arms, adjusted her posture, turned comfortably sideways to rest her head on his shoulder. "Yeah, tomorrow morning. I have to sleep early tonight." Keaton looked at her leaning on his shoulder, lowered the sound and temperature of the hairdryer a bit, spoke no more, turned off the hairdryer, carried her to the bed, and tucked her in. Pine Hill Golf Course was membership only. Usually, one needed an appointment to enter. Pearl got up early the next day. Sylvia originally said she would drive to pick her up, but worried about Sylvia bumping into Keaton and it being hard to explain, she just agreed to meet her at the subway station. Washed and went downstairs. Keaton was sitting at the dining table eating breakfast. Kitty was fawning beside his chair, acting spoiled, asking him for canned food. Keaton asked Auntie Flora to open a can and was feeding the cat. Pearl held the bag containing the golf outfit, glanced at the fawning kitty, and walked towards the entrance hall. "Mrs. Kingsley, not eating breakfast before leaving?" Auntie Flora stopped her. Not eating in a hurry. Pearl changed shoes while speaking. Keaton put Kitty down from his lap, placed the can beside it, and said to her, "I'll drive you." Pearl frowned, looking at him strangely. "You're this free today?" Keaton didn't speak, got up, took his coat and car keys. While buttoning his shirt cuff, he said to Auntie Flora, "Pack the breakfast. Mrs. Kingsley will eat on the way." Auntie Flora said okay and immediately went to pack breakfast. Pearl finished changing shoes, leaned against the hallway wall, and looked at him. Keaton had already taken the car keys to get the car from the garage outside. "Mrs. Kingsley, breakfast." Auntie Flora packed it quickly and handed her the bag with breakfast. Pearl took it, said thanks, and walked out carrying the breakfast bag and clothes bag. Pine Hill Golf Course was near the suburbs. Pearl called Sylvia after getting in the car, saying she caught a ride and not to pick her up at the subway station. Sylvia replied okay. The two agreed to meet directly at the golf course. Weekend suburban roads were congested too, with many driving themselves to the villas and resorts for fun. Pearl checked the blueprints she brought along and started eating breakfast in the car. Auntie Flora packed durian tarts for her. The smell was a bit strong. She couldn't help turning to look at Keaton. Keaton sat in the driver's seat driving, side profile cold, expressionless. "You don't mind, right?" Pearl remembered he was a neat freak and shouldn't like people eating in his car, especially durian-flavored things. Keaton glanced at her expressionlessly. His handsome brows frowned very imperceptibly, but he said nothing, just opened the window a bit to let the wind in. The golf course project was the biggest project their company was pushing currently. The bidding competition for this site was intense. The design drawings had to have enough highlights to possibly stand out in the government bidding meeting. Pearl had been rushing to do homework these days, browsing many related golf course buildings. She was still flipping through design blueprints while eating on the way. Project needs this urgently? While driving, Keaton glanced sideways at the person in the passenger seat. "MN, the design drawings have some issues." Pearl stuffed tart into her mouth, not noticing tart crumbs falling onto her clothes. Keaton watched, suppressing the urge to reach out and clean it off for her, gripping the steering wheel in his hand. Pine Hill Course opened in the suburban area. Keaton parked the car outside the course. Pearl called Sylvia on her phone to meet directly at the front desk. She got out of the car, scooped up her bag and the clothes bag from the back, glanced at Keaton in the driver's seat. "You driving back?" Keaton rested his hand on the steering wheel, looking at her from the car, didn't say yes or no, just asked her, "When are you going back?" Pearl wasn't sure either, frowned and said, "Don't know, but you don't need to pick me up. I'll take Manager Sylvia's car down the mountain." Keaton gave a hum and said nothing more. Pearl pursed her lips, feeling he was a bit strange. "Are you hiding something from me?" Keaton looked sideways at her, expression slightly casual. "Hiding from you." Pearl frowned, too lazy to play word games with him, just slammed the car door shut for him forcefully and headed towards the golf course. Sylvia was already waiting for her in the golf course lobby. Seeing she was still in casual clothes, said to her, "Brought clothes?" Pearl lifted the clothes bag towards her. Sylvia nodded. "Okay, go in first, change clothes and we'll go to the course." The two reported the reservation name together and entered under the guidance of course staff. Sylvia arranged for course staff to help guide their tour. Pearl took the time to change clothes and touch up her makeup in the restroom. When she came out, Sylvia was already waiting for her at the sightseeing car outside. With them was a course coach, who knew the situation here relatively well. Sylvia had already stored her bag for her. Seeing her changed into the golf outfit, couldn't help praising, "This outfit looks good." "No" should be "the person looks good." Pearl was a bit embarrassed, looking down at the skirt hem which was too short when sitting. Fortunately, Sylvia didn't continue teasing her, giving her the prepared blueprints and pen. The two listened to the coach in front explain some precautions about the course while looking at the overall architecture from the sightseeing car. After a round, Pearl made many notes on the blueprint. Sylvia asked the coach to schedule a lesson for them, thinking since they were here, might as well experience it. Course time and slots had to be reserved in advance. The spot Sylvia booked was near the VIP area. The coach and caddy went to get them suitable clubs. Pearl felt a bit hot. The makeup she applied when going out was a bit smudged. She stood by the resting parasol eating fruit from the platter, not wanting to play with the coach at all. Sylvia tried swinging the club herself on the side, missed the hole. The caddy on the side ran over to help retrieve the ball. Seeing Pearl just eating fruit over there, she called her. "Pearl, come try too." Pearl frowned uninterested, said she was a bit hungry, continued eating the fruit platter there. Separated by a glass partition, some noise came from the VIP area next door. Sounded like someone talking, heard something like Mr. Kingsley. She was sensitive to the surname Kingsley Jeong, couldn't help pricking up her ears to eavesdrop secretly. Before hearing a few sentences, Sylvia, who was playing ball alone nearby, suddenly headed towards the VIP area. Before Pearl could call out to stop her, she heard Sylvia greeting the people over there through the glass, saying, "Mr. Kingsley, why are you here?" Pearl heard a somewhat cold yet familiar voice, "Manager Sylvia, come to play ball." Pearl stuffed a piece of mango into her mouth, almost wanting to turn around and leave immediately. But Sylvia had already spoken, bringing a designer under me here for a site reference. "Pearl, come say hello to Mr. Kingsley." Pearl braced herself and turned around. Keaton stood under the eaves of the VIP area, wearing a black and white golf outfit, one hand in his pocket. His cold, deep brows appeared somewhat indifferent, looking at her lightly. Sylvia was still introducing her to Keaton, saying she was a new, cutting-edge designer in the company, very spirited, etc., completely unnoticed that Pearl had almost buried her head in the golf hole. "Pearl, this is Mr. Kingsley, Von Schning's new boss. You should have seen him at last week's regular meeting." Sylvia pulled her sleeve, signaling her to be smart with her eyes. Facing Keaton's oppressive gaze, Pearl looked up at him and called out, "Hello, Mr. Kingsley." Don't know if it was her illusion, she felt after saying this, Keaton seemed to smile. But looking up, he was just holding the golf club, looked at her quite indifferently for 2 seconds, nodded and said seriously, "MN, hello Architect Fairchild." Fortunately, Sylvia seemed quite thick-skinned and noticed nothing, continuing to talk about the project on the side. Keaton came to play with a few friends he knew. Behind him were several young men and women also dressed in golf attire. He obviously had no mind to listen to work reports at this moment. Responding casually, he picked up the mineral water nearby, opened it, and drank 2 mouthfuls with his head back. Pearl looked down at the plastic grass under her feet, grinding her toe back and forth on it. "MN, wait until the bidding meeting ends next month, hard work manager Sylvia." Keaton spoke, capped the mineral water bottle, also ground his shoe on the grass, his gaze landing on Pearl aside, saying lightly, "Architect Fairchild, flowers and grass have feelings, show mercy underfoot." Pearl silently moved her foot back. Sylvia paused, glanced at Pearl, smiled. "Then Mr. Kingsley, you stay busy." She didn't continue reporting, turning to pull Pearl away. Pearl sighed in relief as if a heavy burden was lifted. Originally, Keaton suddenly becoming Von Schning's boss gave her some psychological pressure. Now she had to report work face to face. Real husband turned boss, wished she could submit her resignation tomorrow. Sylvia pulled her away, whispering as they walked, "Do you know Mr. Kingsley?" Pearl shook her head immediately. "Don't know him." Sylvia frowned, but didn't suspect much, only said, "Mr. Kingsley was also in the architecture department at Beijing University before, but when you were in school, he should have graduated already." Pearl didn't speak, just glanced towards the sunny lawn ahead, said to Sylvia, "Bit hot, I want to go to the lobby to rest a while." Sylvia glanced outside the course, also felt hot, nodded. "Okay, wait for me a bit. I booked the lesson, 2,000 plus a session, I have to finish it." Pearl nodded. "I'll wait for you in the lobby." Sylvia said no more, letting her go out first. Pearl took her phone, walked from the course area to the lobby. Cold air from the indoor lobby blew over. A waiter holding a tray rushed towards the course area, didn't pay attention, and bumped straight into Pearl. Orange juice on the tray spilled, splashing all over Pearl. Sorry, the waiter apologized repeatedly. Pearl looked down at the juice on her, retreated a few steps, shook her head saying, "It's okay, not your fault, I bumped into you." The golf course manager also heard the noise and came over. "Sorry, ma'am, shall we take you to change clothes first? We will compensate for dry cleaning." Sylvia was playing with the coach over there, didn't notice the commotion here, just as Pearl wanted to say no need. "Take her to my room to change." Someone suddenly walked over from the side. Pearl turned her head. Keaton looked calm, holding a suit jacket in his hand at some point. Walking up to her, he lowered his head and very naturally tied the jacket around her waist. Pearl frowned, instinctively wanted to back away. Keaton looked up at her, pulled her closer using the jacket, and said faintly to the manager beside, "Take this lady's things to my room too." Pearl glared at him with warning in her eyes. Keaton looked calm, looking down at her as if not understanding her meaning, slightly raising an eyebrow. "Any problem?" Pearl held her breath and didn't speak. Looking at the two, the manager understood something and immediately said to Pearl, "Ma'am, please follow me." Pearl looked down at the juice on her, already somewhat sticky. She said nothing more, following the manager upstairs. The golf course here was combined with a resort. Upstairs were resting suites, but only course members were eligible to stay. Pearl followed the manager upstairs. Keaton's hotel suite location was excellent. Entering, there was a floor-to-ceiling window, able to see the green lawn and fountain of the course below. She had no mind to admire, taking clothes to the bathroom ready to change. The door just closed, then opened from outside. Pearl almost didn't need to think to know who it was. She hadn't really started changing yet, just took off the suit jacket tied around her waist. A large patch of the white golf dress was sticky from orange juice, and the suit jacket was stained a bit too. Hearing the sound outside, she opened the bathroom door and came out. Keaton was leaning against the wet bar drinking water. His figure looked thin, waist very narrow, yet full of power. The sports polo shirt accentuated broad shoulders and long legs, bones and muscles stretching the shoulders, contours fully visible. Seeming to hear the bathroom door open, he turned to look. Pearl leaned against the bathroom door frame looking at him. Keaton's gaze landed on her, slowly moving down her body. Showing no emotion, he raised his eyebrows slightly and said lightly, "Changed." Pearl pursed her lips, shuffled further into the bathroom, hand pressing against the bathroom door frame, looking at him somewhat warily. "Haven't changed yet. What did you come up for?" Keaton put down the mineral water bottle in his hand, walked towards her and said, "Can't I enter my own room?" Pearl watched him walk up to her, pursed her lips, picked up her clothes bag from the bathroom sink. "Then I'll go." Keaton grabbed her wrist, blocking the doorway. Pearl looked at him somewhat fiercely. "What are you doing?" Keaton's gaze fell on her, seeing her outfit today. High ponytail, blue and white golf outfit, legs straight and long, white sneakers, looking very youthful, like a university student still in school. He looked at her for a while, eyes always quite calm, showing not much emotion, but pried open her fingers one by one. Doing nothing. As he spoke, he took the bag from her hand, tossed it casually onto the cabinet beside, and carried her horizontally. Pearl was startled by his sudden action, almost instinctively reached out to hug his neck. Her whole body hung on him. Keaton pinned her against the bathroom wall, pinched her jaw, and started kissing her. Pearl paused, reached out to push him away, covering her mouth, not letting him kiss. "Who let you kiss me?" Her voice was muffled, revealing only a pair of eyes glaring at him fiercely. Like Kitty when angry, fur bristling. Keaton didn't retreat, just looked at her quietly for a few seconds, supported her with one hand, removed her covering hand, and went to kiss her again. Pearl dodged, saying a bit angrily, "I knew you had no good intentions calling me up here." Keaton smiled, hugged her, still pinning her against the wall, not letting her down. Fingers helped brush the hair falling by her ear aside, asking lightly, "How do I have no good intentions?" Pearl let out a hump from her nose. "You know in your heart." "Is that so?" Keaton looked at her very closely, voice deepening a few notches. Gaze falling heavily on her face, suddenly bent his finger and rubbed under her eye, saying, "Wore makeup today?" Pearl frowned, slapped his hand away. Makeup smudged. Keaton looked down at the pale pink on his fingertip, then rubbed it on her lips. Soft, cool lips. Pearl applied lip glaze. After forming a film, it was a bit shiny. Rubbed by his finger, it was ruined instantly. She was really angry. Keaton watched her completely annoyed, really just like Kitty, almost baring claws to bite him. He suddenly grabbed her wrist first, leaned in, lowered his head and kissed her. He kissed hard this time, hand also using some strength to press her wrist, preventing movement. Pearl struggled a few times, opened her mouth to bite him, but he took the chance to pry open her teeth. Keaton tasted the lipstick on her lips, a very fresh rose flavor, and the rich scent on her cheeks and hair dizzy from the heat. Pearl was kissed, somewhat breathless, hands buckling his shoulders, scratching him. Keaton didn't kiss too long, retreating slightly, just using the tip of his nose to gently rub her cheek, looking at her flushed, panting face from a short distance. Pearl's face and ears were red, lipstick on her lips all smudged. But minus the arrogant annoyance just now, only a pair of eyes glaring at him with a hint of mist. Keaton looked at her, slender fingers grinding on her red lips kissed by him, whispering, "Stay here tonight, go back tomorrow morning." Pearl didn't speak, just suddenly opened her mouth and bit the finger he pressed on her lips. Keaton didn't withdraw, letting her bite, leaned over to kiss her again, tone rarely carrying a few hints of gentleness. "Call manager Sylvia to leave first, HM?" Pearl's back leaned against the bathroom wall, chest heaving slightly. Struggled a bit, got down from him, went to dig through her bag thrown on the cabinet, found her phone, called Sylvia. "Hello, manager Sylvia." She held the phone, pressed to her ear, felt a warm, hard body pressing up from behind, hugging her. "Amen, you go back first, don't wait for me, I'll take a taxi myself later." Keaton let her hair down, kissing her ear. Pearl shrank her shoulders, feeling a bit ticklish. Sylvia asked a few more sentences there. Pearl kept herself from making strange sounds. Phone just hung up, snatched away by someone from behind and thrown back on the cabinet. Keaton picked her up directly onto the cabinet, cupped her face and started kissing her, somewhat urgent and aggressive. Pearl's hands braced on the counter behind her, leaning back. Keaton held her waist, moving closer. His eyes were very dark, carrying intense oppression, almost pressing close to kiss her, breath pushing deep between lips and teeth. Pearl worried about falling, hands hugged him, fingers threading into his black, short, hard hair. Keaton carried her down, walking towards the bedroom and the suite. "I haven't showered yet," Pearl whispered. Juice on her body hadn't been cleaned, clothes hadn't been changed. Keaton placed her on the bed, half kneeling by the bed, taking off his shirt, revealing a body with distinct thin muscles, broad shoulders, lines rising and falling clearly. He pulled her over, placed her on his lap, while kissing her, hands landed on the golf outfit on her body, lips and kisses falling along her cheek downwards, voice deep, "Keep it on for now." Pearl fell asleep buried in the quilt after being carried out of the bathroom. The bedroom outside the suite was changed by the resort staff. She slept in the small bedroom inside. When she woke up, the sky outside was already a bit dark. Taking the phone by the bed to check, it was almost 6 p.m. She slept for more than 2 hours. Coming out of the room, there was no one in the suite outside. Keaton wasn't there. Pearl rubbed her messy hair draped behind her head, walked to the balcony outside, and called Keaton. From the view of their room, one could clearly see the terrain architecture of the entire golf course. The gray-blue skyline slowly descended, and the green lawn was a bit dark. The phone connected quickly. Keaton's voice came from that side, awake. Pearl stood by the railing holding the phone, looking down. "MN, where are you?" Keaton's side seemed a bit noisy, like he was with people. "In the box downstairs, hungry?" Pearl touched her stomach, so hungry it was caving in. She answered truthfully, "Hungry." Keaton seemed to laugh very faintly on that side, came out of the somewhat noisy room, said to her, "Change clothes, I'll pick you up at the elevator." Pearl gave an "oh" and hung up. Before entering the room to change, she used her phone to take a panoramic photo of the golf course from the balcony. Keaton finished the call, went back to the box and knocked, said to Chester Zane and Timothy Slate, who were playing cards, picking someone up. Just now, they were playing cards, he suddenly took a call and went out, now saying he's going to pick someone up. "Who is it? Needing you to pick up personally." Timothy was almost winning this round, determined not to let him go, waved to a staff member beside him saying, "You go pick up the person for Mr. Kingsley. We're in the middle of a game, no rule allows slipping away halfway." Keaton stood at the door, phone still by his ear not taken down, wearing a black shirt, tall with long legs, temperament cold and outstanding, the most eye-catching in the whole box. Chester and Timothy brought a few small celebrities who kept blushing secretly looking at him. "Put this round on me." He glanced at their cards, said directly. Timothy and Chester looked at each other, sensing something fishy. "Fine." Keaton ignored their teasing gazes, closed the box door, and went to the elevator to pick up Pearl. "Master Joe, Master Song, who was that just now?" A bold one among the small celebrities on the sofa asked. Chester laughed, looked at that female celebrity. "Why, took a fancy." Timothy lit a cigarette, pretending to be jealous. "What's this about? I brought you, right?" That female celebrity smiled, quite generous. "I like that type." "Is he single?" Chester and Timothy looked at each other, both laughed. "Then you can stop thinking about it. Double of double, married for 3 years. The female celebrity paused, a bit surprised, but didn't see him wear a wedding ring. Commercial marriage with his wife, right? Chester and Timothy didn't say much this time. They had known Keaton for a long time, were quite surprised about him marrying Pearl, but also not surprised. Since school days, Keaton was the most popular with women in their group. Many chased him. During UK studies, there were Westerners and mixed-race girls too. But he seemed uninterested in women, barely any scandals around him. Returned to the country 3 years ago, suddenly registered for marriage without warning. Wedding hasn't been held to this day. Few knew about this. But just now, while playing cards, Chester and Timothy noticed something wrong. Scratches on the neck aside, there were marks on the wrist when drawing cards. Looked like scratches, also like bite marks. Chester even asked specifically, "What happened to the hand?" Keaton didn't really hide it, just looked down and said nothing. Timothy played along on the side. "Cat scratched, but when did you raise a cat?" They winked at each other. "Couldn't be a wild cat raised outside, right?" Keaton just glanced at them, replied quite coldly, "Don't have that fetish." Pearl changed clothes, holding phone and room card, walked from corridor to elevator. The resort's architectural design here was quite special. The corridor design was also unique, with many paintings on the wall, looking expensive at a glance. She observed while walking, thinking no wonder her design drafts were rejected. Reaching the elevator, she reached out to press the down button, but saw an adjacent elevator coming up. She stared for a while, suddenly remembered Keaton said he'd pick her up. The hand stretched out shrank back, quietly waiting for that upward elevator. Elevator stopped on her floor. Doors opened slowly. Pearl felt like returning to kindergarten days, waiting at the door with a backpack after school, guessing if Gwendolyn would come to pick her up today. Opening the elevator door, stranger or Keaton. The second before doors opened, she suddenly closed her eyes again, looking down at the carpet pattern underfoot. Doors opened, a few seconds, 10+ seconds, many tens of seconds, no one walked out. Pearl pinched the room card, feeling she seemed to sigh in relief, yet a bit inexplicably disappointed. But actually didn't expect it either. Just ready to look up, suddenly heard Keaton's voice. "How long do you plan to watch ants move here?" Pearl, startled, abruptly looked up at the elevator. Keaton stood leisurely in the elevator, one hand pressing the button, gaze on her. Unknown how long he watched her. Pearl pursed her lips, suppressing the inexplicable emotions suddenly floating up like a balloon in her heart, walked into the elevator. "Where are there ants moving?" Keaton reached out to press the down button, glanced sideways at her lightly. "If not, what were you staring at the ground for?" Pearl didn't speak, just raised her chin, imitating his usual very cold and cool tone saying, "Secret, won't tell you." The private room was under a separate eave outside the course, requiring a walk around a corridor along the water from the lobby front. Pearl followed behind Keaton, observing the resort hotel and the golf course outside while walking. Semi-suspended glass floor, looking up one could see the blue-black clouds and stars overhead. Keaton walked in front, but paced much slower than usual, intentionally waiting for her. Reaching the box, he pushed open the door. Pearl was still thinking about the architectural design here, didn't think too much, followed him in. Chester and Timothy were betting on who Keaton picked up. Hearing the noise, both looked up. Both expressions were a bit stunned, seemingly didn't recognize her much. "This is Keaton, which sister is this, not introducing?" The female celebrity in the box who actively asked about Keaton being single just now also looked over. Pearl frowned, turned to look at Keaton. Keaton walked behind her, closed the box door, hand naturally supported Pearl's waist, pulled out a chair for her to sit, said faintly, "Pearl, my wife." Pearl was quite generous too, nodded towards Chester and Timothy. "I'm Pearl Fairchild." Timothy and Chester looked at each other, didn't quite react. Sister-in-law? Pearl hesitated for 2 seconds at this address, looked at Keaton, slowly nodded. Count as. Yes. Keaton didn't speak, just sat beside her, picked up the ordering tablet on the table, asked staff to come in to serve dishes. Chester and Timothy watched the couple on the side, couldn't help sizing up Pearl, both looking like they saw a ghost. Pearl actually met them before, shortly after marriage. Once Keaton returned from abroad, drunk in the middle of the night, it was either Timothy or Chester using his phone to call her to pick him up. She hadn't graduated then, wearing pajamas and low-degree black-framed glasses, casually going to pick him up in the middle of the night. Result was back, then Chester and Timothy's expressions seeing her were obviously intriguing. Years later, probably didn't recognize her seeing again. Keaton ordered for her. During the wait, went out to bring a fruit platter in for her to pad her stomach first. Chester and Timothy didn't dare speak recklessly since Pearl entered. Dishes hadn't arrived, but the box door was pushed open from outside first. Leon said you were all here. I didn't believe it. Looks like really? The person pushing the door obviously knew everyone in the box well. The personality of barging in without knocking, and the voice also felt incredibly familiar to Pearl. She turned to look. Zinnia saw her, expression instantly changed from happy just now to cold. Zinnia. When did you come back? Chester spoke. Timothy obviously had a good relationship with Zinnia too. Where's Leon? Didn't see on social media you two were still in Hokkaido last time. Zinnia entered, casually threw her bag on the sofa, sat down saying, Hokkaido isn't fun this season, so came back. She acted completely unlike a guest, generous and composed. Pearl lowered her head eating mango on the plate, didn't speak to her, didn't greet either. Timothy and Chester both sensed something weird, but didn't break this eerie atmosphere. They knew Keaton married Zinnia's sister, but these sisters' relationship seemed worse than them outsiders. Keaton didn't speak much since Zinnia entered, just swiped the tablet a few times, finished ordering, handed the tablet to Chester. Chester signaled with eyes asking what's going on. Keaton turned a blind eye, gaze sweeping lightly over Pearl aside, pulled out chair getting up saying, I'm going out for a bit. Pearl frowned looking at him, subconsciously reached out pulling his shirt hem. Where to? Keaton looked down at her, raised his phone, call. Pearl pursed her lips, didn't say anything more, let go to let him out. Food arrived quite fast. Keaton came back after a while. Behind him followed Zinnia's husband Leon Lancaster. After eating, Timothy proposed playing cards together. Pearl didn't know how to play these, also had no interest sitting at a card table with Zinnia, found an excuse to go out saying going to restroom. Corridor design here was a bit complex, location hard to find. She asked a few staff members to find the restroom location. Pushing door in, Zinnia was already at the sink. She turned ready to leave directly. Do you plan to hide whenever you see me in the future? Zinnia's voice sounded from behind, carrying a familiar mean tone. Pearl paused steps, turned around, walked to the sink, turned on the tap. Zinnia looked at her, fed coldly, thought how long you could pretend. Pearl pretended not to hear her, looked down squeezing soap, turned tap water up a bit. Zinnia mocked on the side. Keaton looks average towards you too. Why, is it happiness or swallowing needles? Pearl washed hands, turned off tap, pulled tissue slowly wiping hands clean, then looked up at Zinnia aside. Zinnia, how old are you? Can you have some new tricks after so many years? Boring or not? You, Zinnia stunned for a moment, obviously angered by her, missy temper not pretending anymore. Pearl, what right do you have to say these to me? If not for your cleverness back then, would I be scolded by mom and dad, married off so lightly? Pearl pinched the undropped paper ball in hand, looked at her quietly. Some words I've said many times, don't want to explain again. That movie ticket back then, I really thought he gave it to you. Zinnia glared at her. Sisters same mother different father, but looks differed widely. Zinnia and Serena looked like children born of Franklin and Gwendolyn at a glance. Pearl looked like neither. Not looking like Franklin was normal, but not like Gwendolyn at all. So growing up wherever she went, most asked question was, whose child is this? Every time Gwendolyn just smiled, never saying she was her child. Serena and Zinnia, one quiet one active, weren't bad to her, but not close either. Serena immersed in her own creation daily, not close to anyone at home. But Zinnia liked bossing Pearl around since young. But Pearl was too lonely. instead of resenting Zinnia's bossing, spontaneously felt a happiness of being needed. So she was Zinnia's little follower, little servant since childhood, also acknowledged sister. Zinnia and Keaton were similar age, university classmates. Originally, families preferred union between Zinnia and Keaton, but Pearl exchanged in Hong Kong freshman year was close to Keaton for a while. Zinnia came to Hong Kong to see her, incidentally visited Rose's home. One day Pearl suddenly saw a movie ticket on her bedroom desk, asked maid knowing Keaton put it in her room. She thought Keaton sent it wrongly then, didn't ask him, privately gave the ticket to Zinnia. Result that night, Zinnia came back after movie crying and fought with her, saying what she took her for, dog blood youth movie sisters fighting for man intentionally yielding ticket to her. Pearl confused, but also learned from Zinnia's fragmented words, Keaton's ticket was for her. Pearl, unfamiliar with romance then, felt hazy and puzzled, looking at Zinnia crying red-eyed helpless, but also curious why Keaton gave her a movie ticket. She pinched that ticket, crumpled by Zinnia, unfolded bit by bit, lay on room desk watching all night, but never figured out what Keaton meant. Next morning, she finally decided to ask Keaton what giving the ticket meant. Result knocked on room door for half a day. Until maid told her, Keaton packed luggage early morning gone to airport, going to UK immediately. Pearl's intuition told her to chase immediately to ask what the ticket meant, otherwise might regret forever. She immediately took taxi to airport, but missed it. Flight took off long ago, and Keaton's phone and WeChat couldn't connect. He seemed to change phone and contact. 19-year-old Pearl sat alone at airport, pinching that ticket of unknown meaning, sat all day, then taxied back herself. For a long time after, she didn't see Keaton again. Relationship with Zinnia became very poor. Shortly after Zinnia agreed to childhood friend Leon's proposal, at their wedding, she finally saw Keaton again. Unlike back in Hong Kong, Keaton became taller, handsome, also mature. Seemed to become people of two worlds, eyes looking at her very strange, even cold. Pearl originally gathered courage wanting to talk to him, ask meaning of that ticket back then, but didn't ask. Later, she went to Paris for grad school. Keaton stayed in London developing, occasionally thought about finding him. Paris to London train 2 hours, drive 5 hours, plane ferry 1 hour. But she never went to find him once. Of course, he never looked for her. Paris study load heavy, her language bad, slowly almost forgot that ambiguous ticket. Until 3 years ago, families uniting, he suddenly named to marry her. She hadn't graduated then, confusedly called back by Gwendolyn and Franklin to marry. Coming out of Czech Lapcock Airport, he drove to pick her up. Hong Kong weather bad, gloomy, like typhoon coming. He wore dark blue shirt, handsome thin face, brow bone sharp, thin lips, cold deep features, much more mature and cold than memory. Outside airport car, lights dim yellow shining over, sharp light folding along his stereoscopic cold features, making him appear in faint dark blue light and shadow. Unreal. On that long seaside highway to registry, he suddenly turned asking her, "Is it voluntary?" That was the first sentence he actively said to her after that ticket. Pearl turned head, originally wanting to look at him, but attracted by beautiful coastline outside driver window. From dark green to deep blue seawater, wet fog almost spreading into window. She opened mouth, originally wanting to ask, "Was that ticket for me?" but finally only turned into a silent "Amen." Keaton looked at her a few seconds, cold handsome face appearing unclear under seawater fog outside window, didn't say another word. To this day, Pearl actually didn't know why he insisted on marrying her. When Pearl returned, Zinnia had left. Leon was getting Zinnia's bag. Leon and Zinnia were childhood sweethearts, families were neighbors since young, relationship good. But the Lancaster family couldn't compare to Kingsley, previous years even worse than Fairchild, so Franklin and Gwendolyn weren't satisfied with this marriage initially. Zinnia insisted on marrying, they originally spoiled Zinnia, finally agreed. Post-marriage Leon changed his previous idle ways, started taking over Lancaster business. Didn't take long for Lancaster to surpass Fairchild by a large margin. Franklin and Gwendolyn, who looked down on Leon, barely accepted. Pearl. Leon saw her, smiled, actively greeted. Pearl also greeted, brother-in-law. Leon held Zinnia's bag, glanced at Keaton, spoke, "Your second sister sometimes has sharp tongue tofu heart, actually cares about you quite a bit." Pearl didn't say anything. Leon patted her shoulder, got up, closing box door, leaving. Chester and Timothy long saw something wrong with sisters' relationship, dared not say anything just now. Keaton was playing Guandon with them, celebrities in box all gone. Pearl, bored, sat by sofa, wanted to go up rest. Keaton turned to her, pointed at his card table, asked her, "Play 2 rounds." Pearl sat on sofa, looked up at him, shook head, "I don't know how." Keaton got up, gave seat to her, "Try." "Losses on me?" Chester and Timothy lost several rounds in a while, just wanted to win back quickly, immediately said, "Sister-in-law, come play a few." "Yeah, losing doesn't cost money anyway." Pearl looked, a bit tempted. Keaton glanced at the 2 on table, looked towards Pearl, voice flat, "MN, lose freely." Pearl walked over, took cards from his hand, unconvinced. "Who said I'll definitely lose?" Keaton didn't speak, just slightly raised eyebrow. Timothy and Chester waited, just wanted to win back all lost from Pearl. Pearl not interested in cards, but studied architecture, sensitivity to numbers, and memory required high. Several rounds dealt, she groped rules tentatively first few rounds, indeed losing. Keaton watched behind her, no intention to guide, just watching her play. Chester and Timothy, delighted, didn't let her leave table. But starting 4th round, Pearl obviously figured out rules, started turning tables. Timothy watched, just one back, about to vomit out, couldn't help looking up at Keaton behind Pearl. "You guys didn't cheat, right?" Keaton ignored him, only looked down at Pearl's cards. Guandon popular only these 2 years. They played Texas Hold'em more before. Pearl saw classmates play Texas in Paris, researched slightly, but didn't really play. Later rounds she completely suppressed Chester and Timothy, winning back all lost previously, and winning several consecutive rounds. Not playing. Timothy threw cards, clearly couldn't afford losing. "Play more, my company's turnover next month will be lost." Chester smiled too, put down cards, "Sister-in-law amazing." Pearl put down cards calmly, glanced at Keaton aside, chin slightly raised, provocatively looking at him, "Not that hard." Keaton looked up at her, gaze on her face, nodded, quite seriously said, "MN, amazing." Pearl fed lightly, put down cards, mood expanded a lot, sleepy, going back to rest first. They still had work to chat, had to switch venue later. Keaton checked time, turned to call staff outside in, take her upstairs to rest. Back in room, Pearl redrew drafts sketched on sightseeing car during day, added design inspiration from resort to architectural blueprints. But didn't bring laptop, could only draw on paper. Before sleep she put draft papers on nightstand, didn't wait for Keaton, slept first. Changed bed a bit, recognizing bed, Pearl didn't sleep deep. So woke up once Keaton returned. He seemed to drink a bit, Pearl smelled alcohol on him once at bedside. Hazily opened eyes, Keaton sat by bed looking at her design drafts. Pearl sobered up instantly, instinctively reached out to snatch the papers from his hand. "I drew randomly, don't look." Keaton returned the papers to her, glanced at her, said lightly, "Drawn well." Pearl stuffed papers by nightstand, didn't speak. Room unlit, Keaton's shirt buttons undone too. Cold, indifferent face, rarely showing gentleness. He scanned papers casually stuffed on nightstand. "I thought you wouldn't be an architect." Pearl paused hearing this, but didn't speak, just leaned against headboard, slightly looking up at him. "Why?" Gwendolyn was famous architecture professor at Beijing U. Many formidable domestic architects were her students. Keaton was her student too. When Pearl applied for major, almost no choice, only allowed architecture. But Zinnia and Serena could choose majors they liked. So for a long time, she really hated architecture. Exchange in Hong Kong was peak of her loathing for architecture. Because of Rose, she visited Kingsley home often, Keaton occasionally responsible for pickup, also drove her out for fun, so before-ticket event indeed had a quite good memory. Keaton didn't speak, just looked at her for a while, tone without much fluctuation, guessed. Pearl looked at him from dim light, hands on quilt clenched down, suddenly said, "Keaton," she called him, wanting to ask, was that ticket given to her? Why leave without word, why treat her like stranger for years but suddenly marry her? "HM," Keaton looked at her, body leaned forward slightly, reached out clasping her nape, breath with thin alcohol scent invading nose. He held her chin, started kissing her, kisses falling densely on corner of lips and neck. Pearl paused but didn't close eyes, just looking at him. "What did you want to ask?" Keaton kissed a while, fingers pinching her chin, retreated slightly, eyes looking closely at her, asked again. Pearl didn't speak, just shook head, reached out hugging back his neck, kissed him back. Next morning breakfast at resort restaurant, Pearl and they prepared to go down. Staff helped drive car outside. Pearl habitually went around to passenger side ready to board. Keaton suddenly called her, threw keys to her. "You drive." Expression looked quite calm. Juice in morning seemed to have alcohol. Resort specialty drink, he felt wrong after drinking. Pearl gave an "oh," didn't say anything, took keys, went to driver's side. License got early, but drove few times, occasionally helped drive at work. Keaton sat in passenger seat, seatbelt not fastened yet. Pearl stepped on gas, drove out directly. Downhill road easy to drive, newly built winding mountain road. Pearl drove steady, just speed a bit fast. Keaton looked at her from passenger seat, slightly surprised at her driving skills. "Any cars in my garage you like?" Pearl turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" Keaton leaned back, plain voice. "If you don't want to ride my car to work, drive yourself." Pearl thought, slightly tempted. "What car's in your garage?" "Can I drive?" Keaton thought slightly, then find time to buy a new one. Pearl frowned, looked at him warily. "Why suddenly so good to me?" Keaton noncommittal. "When was I ever bad to you?" Pearl held steering wheel, fed, too many times. Keaton raised brow bone, didn't continue bickering. Turned topic back. "Won quite a bit last night. Buy whatever car with that money, counts as your own." Pearl heard finally tempted, thought saying, "Also fine." Monday at work Pearl gave revised drafts to Sylvia. Sylvia finished reading quite satisfied, asked her to office for chat. Project content finished, Pearl ready to leave office. Sylvia stopped her, making coffee while chatting. "Right, when did you leave that day?" Pearl paused, thinking of event upstairs, inexplicably guilty, just that night. Sylvia gave coffee to her, returned to desk, narrowed eyes at her, suddenly asked, "You?" "No, Mr. Kingsley." "Of course not," Pearl denied almost without thinking. Sylvia was her university senior, knew each other long, recommended her to von Schning. But marriage with Keaton, except families barely anyone knew. "Is that so?" Sylvia seemed to just ask casually, didn't really discover anything. Felt Mr. Kingsley talking to you at course that day was a bit strange. Pearl pinched documents in hand. No, maybe seeing unfamiliar face. Sylvia nodded, didn't say more. "I'll submit drafts these 2 days. If no feedback from above then finalized, if changes needed, I'll contact you." "Okay." Pearl sighed in relief, closed office door leaving. Back at desk, Zoe sneaked over talking. "Chatted what?" Pearl closed layers on computer, designed drafts. Zoe glanced uninterestedly at her computer, moved back. Evening off work, Pearl packed things ready to leave. Phone suddenly received message from Keaton. "Wait for me in my office." Pearl looked at phone, stopped steps walking out. Zoe and colleagues walking to elevator, seeing her standing at door, called her, "Pearl, standing for what, not going?" Pearl turned off phone, looking at Zoe and colleagues. "You guys go first, I seem to have a draft unfinished." Zoe frowned. "Come tomorrow, work's over." Pearl shook head. "You go back first, I'll finish quickly." Before Zoe said more, she returned to desk. Wait until colleagues gone mostly, Pearl walked to exclusive elevator. Reaching to press, fingers paused slightly, messaged Keaton, "Which floor?" Keaton replied fast, 27th floor. Pearl pressed elevator, exclusive floor arrived fast. But off work time now, 27th floor empty. She passed secretary office, walked forward room by room. "Mrs. Kingsley." Simon's voice sounded from behind. Pearl, startled, turned to look. Simon smiled politely at her. "Mr. Kingsley asked me to take you to his office. He's still meeting." Keaton, busy with video conference, saw Pearl upstairs on monitor, but couldn't find office. But couldn't leave, messaged Simon to guide. "Oh," Pearl followed Simon forward. White floor almost reflected shadows, whole floor quiet, barely sound except footsteps. Simon stopped before a black door office. "This is Mr. Kingsley's office. Lounge inside. You can rest while waiting, meeting about half-hour more." Pearl frowned. "What does he want? Half-hour so long?" Simon shook head. "I don't know, Mr. Kingsley didn't tell me." Pearl said no more, pushed open office door entering. Keaton's office layout similar to home study. Wall of bookshelves, French window, black leather sofa and coffee table, same tone desk. Only highlight was window view overlooking half city. Pearl threw bag on sofa, walked to window looking down. Evening Beijing, traffic congested, roads stuffed with colorful lights, unclear but panoramic. Watched a while, walked to bookshelf scanning, no interesting books. Keaton's desk large but quite empty. Besides pen holder, a silver wooden horse ornament. Pearl picked up silver horse, looked, put back, suddenly noticed a face-down photo frame-like thing aside. Paused, curious, reached to take frame. Office door opened from outside. Pearl's reaching hand stopped, turned to look at door. Keaton entered wearing shirt, holding coat casually like just rushed back from meeting. Waited long? He entered, didn't notice her action, casually undid tie, walked to wet bar pouring water, asked. Pearl put hand down, inexplicably guilty, 10+ minutes. Expression natural, sat directly on his office chair, called me up for what? Keaton drank water, glanced sideways at her, said lightly, some nerve, daring to sit in boss's seat. Pearl spun on chair, hands on armrests. Off work, you're not my boss. Keaton didn't speak, gaze swept over her lightly, seemed to smile but fleeting, didn't say buying car, walked to desk, took coat and keys, looked at her. Appointment with 4S shop today. Pearl almost forgot, really buying me car? Keaton raised brow bone, looking at her. Don't want? Pearl shook head, immediately got up from chair, walked to sofa grabbing bag, my money. Why not? Keaton didn't speak, holding coat and keys, reached to take her bag, opened office door. 4S shop appointment made. Pearl tried a few, liked all, finally picked a Porsche. Test driving. Keaton stood outside window looking, not picking more expensive one. Hand on window edge, cuffs rolled revealing cold sharp wrist bone, looking at Pearl in driver's seat. New Cullinan arrived 2 days ago, try? Pearl sat holding wheel, shook head, refused without thinking. No, just this. Usually driving to work, not suitable, too high profile. Keaton watched her shaking back and forth with test drive, nodded. Okay, this then. Bought car, Pearl impatient to drive away. Keaton's car parked outside, seeing her not intending to board his, driving away directly. Pearl sat in driver's seat, looking at him, nodded undisguised. I want to drive back myself, let's go separately. Keaton didn't speak, stood by his black G-Wagon, glanced calmly at her new car, walked to passenger side, opened door, got in. Pearl hadn't closed door, startled by him. What are you doing? Keaton threw coat casually in back seat, fastened seatbelt, drive your car back. Pearl stunned, staring at him. What about your car? Staff smiled aside. Mr. Kingsley, we can deliver your car after maintenance later. Keaton nodded. MN, thanks. Staff said no trouble, called someone to drive his car away. Pearl turned to look at him, drove out dissatisfied. I wanted to experience driving without passenger. Keaton leaned back, glanced lightly at her. Wait till I travel tomorrow, you can experience. Pearl drove onto road, heard pause, turned to look, traveling again. Where? Keaton looked at car behind and mirror, frowned, reminded seriously. Pearl, look front and mirrors when driving. Pearl held wheel, moved gaze to road ahead. Car drove a while, stopped at red light. Keaton turned head, pursed lips looking at her a few seconds. Let Uncle Zhao follow you these days driving. Uncle Zhao was Keaton's driver, responsible for pickup when Pearl drove before. Pearl turned to him, meaning, opinion on my skills. Keaton, face cold, looking calmly at her, nodded. MN, big opinion. Pearl retorted, dissatisfied. Then dare sit in my car. Keaton adjusted seatbelt, looked at her unconvinced expression. Why dare not? Tone indifferent, expression calm, looking eyes with her. Pearl glared a few seconds, tightened lips, turned face, looking angrily at traffic ahead. Place Keaton traveling to was Hong Kong. Company cooperation, back to Hong Kong for meeting. Flight in morning, Pearl hadn't woken when departing. Yesterday bought car back, Pearl ignored him, intentionally hugged kitty rubbing cat hair, didn't want him touching. Keaton saw through, didn't act beastly forcing. But sleeping midnight, she turned unquietly, legs pressing him, dreaming kicking him. Next morning 7 a.m. flight. Keaton kicked awake, looked at person kicking him, held her knees, pulled dreaming person over. Pearl obviously slept deep but woke up. Looked down, reacted few seconds, whimpered a few sentences. Completely awake, started cursing him bastard. Keaton used to her not recognizing people behavior. Lifted face, brow bone stained, cold face deep and dark, straightened pinching chin, kissed fiercely. Keaton barely slept. Carried person out from bath, Pearl slept again, muttering bastard. Driver Uncle Zhao drove to airport. Keaton thought of her driving yesterday, couldn't help instructing. Uncle Zhao, trouble you follow Pearl driving these days, contact anytime if issue. Uncle Zhao brought from Hong Kong, smiled saying okay, used not standard HK Mandarin. Your goodness to Mrs. Kingsley only we know, some words must say yourself, otherwise she doesn't know. Keaton sat back seat, didn't speak, looked at not fully bright Beijing outside, lightly said, "In her eyes I'm probably world's biggest bad guy." Hazy fog mixed with bridge lights projected into window, face cold indifferent, still emotionless calm. Keaton traveling, Pearl quiet, but woken midnight before leaving, nearly late for work. Project progress pushed forward finally, Sylvia submitted drafts, results soon. Pearl ran West City site again before drafts finalized. Bidding next month, land government key project, many companies watching. Although West City suburban now, surrounding environment average, value definitely rise after resort. Pearl drove loop at site, few people there, evening gloomy like rain. Dared not stay, drove back, road empty, wind blew trees noisy, scary. Backway stared hard at road, dared not distract, relieved reaching city. But received call from Fairchild Homes suddenly. Heart repelled but answered. Maid called, saying Gwendolyn fell stairs accidentally, sent to hospital, asked her to visit. Pearl received call, drove to hospital immediately. Got off, sure enough rained. No umbrella in car, worried Gwendolyn, ignored rain ran to lobby. Asked room number, rushed up. Before entering room, heard Serena and Zinnia talking to Gwendolyn. Stopped steps entering. I'm fine, just careless. Gwendolyn voice helpless, mixed with imperceptible intimacy. Zinnia fed, you're fine, sister, and I almost scared to death. Serena peeling fruit aside, full checkup in 2 days, you and Dad watch health. Gwendolyn leaned on bed, rarely gentle, okay, listen to you. Pearl stood at door a while, wet rain cold on skin, dripping on floor. Nurses and doctors approaching, didn't enter, turned to elevator down. Back in car, clothes half wet. Turned on heater, took off wet shoes, drove back directly. Mr. Kingsley. Simon knocked open hotel room. Keaton woke not long, standing before mirror buttoning shirt, cold face sparse against Victoria Harbor outside. Simon held documents, closed door behind. Keaton landed Hong Kong directly to hotel rest. Returned few times, mostly stayed hotel penthouse. Morning landed immediately meeting at local company, then Simon drove to hotel rest. Evening banquet attending, international exchange. Cooperation with SAGY changed to tomorrow afternoon 3 p.m. Company temporarily swapped new representative from Kuala Lumpur. Simon reported aside. Keaton buttoned tie listening. Wrist raised showed faint red marks, Pearl bit. She had bad habit when couldn't take it liked hugging arm, biting finely. Marks not heavy like rubbing. Keaton looked at wrist marks, thought of last time this morning. She sleepy, long hair entangled shoulder arm like algae. Knowing while asking hug. Keaton held her waist, pursed thin lips pushing hair, staring expression. She covered his eyes, hammered him angrily, cried a few sentences, finally buried face in neck sobbing. Mr. Kingsley, Simon finished report, waited arrangements, saw him silent. MN, Keaton put on watch covering bite mark, face unchanged, follow your arrangement. Simon silent, nodded, okay. Evening banquet lasted till almost 10. Fortunately close to hotel, few blocks, drive 10 minutes. Keaton drank quite a bit, tie loose on neck, cold white handsome face showed no drunkenness. Car passed road before harbor, humid night wind poured in. Opposite street sweet soup shop open, tourists queuing. Keaton suddenly spoke back seat, stop. Simon paused, pulled over, Mr. Kingsley? Keaton didn't speak, opened door, got off, walked to shop. Simon followed worried. Keaton queued behind people, ordered mango pomelo sago. Want one? Holding coat, handsome face cold, usual emotionless look. Simon shook head, said didn't like sweets. Keaton said nothing, packed one, got on car. Simon followed Keaton since graduation, impression Keaton didn't like sweets either. Midnight buying sweet soup felt strange, but hard to ask when boss liked this. On car, Simon drove to hotel. Wei Keaton called phone back seat, rang a while no answer. Simon vaguely saw expression in mirror, seemed fleeting emotion. But too fast, unclear. Dialed once, no answer didn't redial. Hong Kong neon flashing, lights fell in window, Keaton leaned back, folded light on contoured face, looked cold indifferent, as if new call result long ago. Arriving hotel, took coat off, said thanks to Simon. Packed soup left back seat, didn't take getting off. Simon wanted to remind, but inexplicably felt Keaton forgot intentionally. Pearl drove home from hospital, showered, slept. Woke dizzy, maybe cold from rain. Auntie Flora made breakfast downstairs, feeding Kitty. Dizzily walked down, saw one set tableware, realized later Keaton went Hong Kong. Mrs. Kingsley, uncomfortable. Auntie Flora saw her pale face pouring water. Pearl shook head, found Kit, ate cold pill. Driving to work jammed, remembered phone muted last night not opened. Found phone besides work messages. Actually Keaton missed call. Time last night 10+. She slept long ago, rang 10 seconds didn't catch. Lay on wheel looking a while, didn't know why calling midnight, messaged asking matter. Empty chat quiet, didn't reply. Traffic moved, threw phone and bag, drove on. Company meeting morning. Pearl ate pill morning, head dizzy, didn't listen meeting. Ended back desk, Zoe asked. Shook head cold, didn't eat lunch, slept on desk. Sleepy hazy, colleagues chatting pantry. Voice not loud, didn't stop. Seemed saying Vanshning, Hong Kong cooperation. Singapore project, SAGY representative swapped temporarily. Keaton went Hong Kong for SAGY. Pearl didn't want to listen, but ears brain sensitive to Kingsley related. Heard alumni London U, ex-girlfriend more accurate, heard same tutor, recognized couple in circle, broke up somehow. Called what? Oh, Catherine. Pearl lay on desk, rain cold brain seemed clearer. Zoe left pantry back desk. Pearl, moved chair closer, called again. Pearl, okay. Zoe felt wrong, reached hair, ready to touch head. Pearl opened eyes, climbed up looking. What doing? Zoe scared. Scared me, thought what happened? Pearl calm, except cheeks slightly red, no strange. Zoe glanced position, slept when last night, canteen open, eat? Pearl shook head, no need. Got up, holding cup, walked pantry. Afternoon. Pearl looked submitted drafts, Sylvia private message check email, sent file. Opened, Pine Hill original drafts, and resort model. Head dizzy, thought mistake, original drafts confidential industry, unless architect self, impossible get. Couldn't help ask Sylvia source. Sylvia surprised, you don't know Mr. Kingsley is Pine Hill architect. Pearl stared message stunned, really didn't know, no wonder familiar course. Pearl opened original drafts, resort course integrated, file hand drawn, font faintly recognizable Keaton's. Pearl senior year, Keaton studied under Gwendolyn, one winter break, didn't return HK, stayed Pearl home. Tutored Pearl free 1 month. So Pearl familiar handwriting. Bottom signature. Keaton Kingsley 3 words powerful deep. Pearl stared words a while, thought noon pantry words. Keaton Hong Kong SAGY negotiation representative Catherine. Catherine. Remembered, 5 years ago Paris exchange new Keaton girlfriend was Catherine. Evening off work, Pearl still uncomfortable. Morning pill no effect, dizzier, brain paste. Maybe fever. Left company, didn't drive garage, planned taxi directly. Roadside before calling, Zinnia called, unwilling originally. Zinnia called again, thought Gwendolyn hospital, answered. Pearl what happened, maid notified yesterday mom hospital, still not coming. Connected, Zinnia voice poured over. Pearl moved phone away, listening buzzing. Where now? Zinnia asked direct. Pearl looked jammed traffic, company downstairs. Zinnia silent moment, tone awkward. Come yourself or send someone. Pearl didn't know why must go, family 4+ outsider applauding. Pearl listening, Zinnia angry silence. Pearl watched cars, touched hot forehead, heard coming myself. Hung up. Arrived hospital Serena Zinnia chatting Gwendolyn. Knocked entered, Gwendolyn glanced, cold, asked, came? Pearl silent, put fruit basket nightstand. Zinnia HM fed, why shouldn't come, should came yesterday. Serena moved basket aside, pale, mom uncomfortable lately, can't eat fruit. Pearl O, used to Serena soft knife. Serena first daughter, most like Gwendolyn, cold indifference to Pearl unlike Zinnia. Treated stranger parasitic home since young, never introduced sister outside. Difference imagination none, Pearl transparent a while, excuse work home leaving. Gwendolyn obviously didn't need, indifferent instructed 2 sentences. Zinnia dissatisfied, Serena stopped eyes, didn't stop. Leaving Serena asked take fruit. Pearl bought hundreds, kept, carried home. Open door, living room empty, Kitty island tail flicking. Auntie Flora not staying night, Keaton Pearl habit alone. Put basket island, boiled water. Felt fever probable, Kit beside cold pills messy pills. Worried allergy again. Drank water big, hot shower, covered quilt sweating sleep. Weekend no work. Woke fever receded bit, ate breakfast downstairs, told Auntie Flora no lunch sleeping, up sleep again. Hazy slept evening, receded fever returned, burned brain paste, bones hurt. Uncomfortable cold sweat, rolled quilt. Kitty scratching door, heard no strength open. Till midnight, someone entered room. Step steady after shave familiar, mixed faint amber. Seemed Keaton back. Pearl hazy thought, next moment felt confused. Keaton Hong Kong now, reminiscing ex-Catherine. Time care her. No one cared her. Eyes swollen sour, brain soggy cream. Felt pillow wet, cried, Keaton bastard, bastard. Hated him, cursed heart quietly. Blur mixed heat burn, light turned on, eyelids hot glaring. Kitty ran in, meowing jump bed. Pearl wanted open eyes, heavy, heard bath noise, later tall figure out, walked bed supported up. Cold towel forehead. Broad hard palm carried up quilt, action not gentle lifted chin, pried teeth, pushed bitter pill mouth. Keaton finished work returned Beijing early. SAGY cooperation smooth, KL representative alumni, grad team partner. So pushed smooth. Temporarily finished returned old house. Rose health poor, Lawrence intended retire a company. Conrad Kingsley said nothing, Keaton overseas years, married work Beijing, less care group. 8 Conrad table mentioned taking over, Pearl matters. Implied taking Pearl HK settle, kids schedule. Keaton knew Conrad, said nothing then. Left old house, didn't return hotel, Simon booked Beijing ticket. Landed Beijing, Uncle Zhao picked. Keaton sat back, unbuttoned suit, asked usual, how Pearl these days? Uncle Zhao followed instructions followed, reported truthfully. Mrs. Kingsley company these days, yesterday hospital then home, didn't drive. Keaton heard said nothing, Gwendolyn's sick new rose, called condolence. But Pearl didn't say, actually trip days, besides missed call, no contact. Opened window wind, told hard work no ask. Car home, living room dark entering. Kitty not usual spot. Keaton put luggage, threw coat sofa, walked island. White marble basket unopened. Look seconds, look stairs. Kitty squatted stairs, meowed. Keaton frowned, walked up. Kitty ran bedroom, scratching door, nails long, scratching harsh. Keaton approached, Kitty looked meowed, continued. Keaton opened, dark room, bed ball quilt. Door open, Kitty jumped. Keaton leaned door looked seconds, no light, slow walked. Pearl slept dishonest usually, covered head. Reminded times useless, quilt messy, breathing loud. Keaton reached, lifted quilt. Dark face unclear, hair messy and tangled, seemed wrong. Reached, touched forehead, hot breath, hot palm. Pearl, called quietly, touched hot face. Skin burning, cold sweat. Keaton up, light on, downstairs water pill up, called private doctor. Back up, Kitty serious squatting. Keaton jaw tight, down found pill, boiled water. Bedroom light, Kitty obedient. Bath wet towel, picked person, wiped covered forehead. Face red under light, hair wet forehead, brow tight, heavy worry. Keaton looked seconds, wiped sweat carefully, took pill, pried teeth fed. Arms resisted, frowned spitting. Keaton buckled chin, forced water down, barely fed. Sick dishonest, unwilling lose, swallowing scratched arm, cursed low. Bastard. Keaton, hate you, bastard pervert. Intermittent, close heard clearly. Keaton arm held, water nightstand, gazed long, pushed sticky hair, put back covered. Doctor came fast, temp 39 plus. Keaton stood side, doctor shot drip. Sent doctor midnight. Bedside stared drip, finished, confirmed receded, carried Kitty out. Pearl woke, fever receded much, hand moved hurt, looked, bruise needle. Stunned seconds. Last night memory poured. Keaton back. Lifted quilt, pajamas changed. Carpet weak, open door out downstairs. Living room quiet, Kitty island sleeping, kitchen noise, walked over. Keaton kitchen out, holding porridge. Expression unchanged, calm glance, pill island. Pearl looked, stunned seconds, went back. Keaton didn't speak, walked side, tested temp, poured water, broke pill palm, last night. Tone emotionless, looked eyes, asked, fever why not hospital? 2 trips back, allergy fever. Pearl guilty blinked, holding cup, swallowed pill. Keaton saw silent, lifted face. Frowned, pretty face haggard, pitiful. Burned night, lips peeled, hair frizzy, unlike Kitty, like roadside grass puppy. Keaton face serious tight, backhand touched forehead, confirmed. Pearl knew wrong, rarely choked, obedient touched, eyes looking. Eyes round, pupil black bright. Actually like puppy eyes. Keaton looked a while, tucked hair ear, expression eased slightly, asked, still uncomfortable. Pearl shook head, nodded, leaned closer, hugged waist, pill bitter. Keaton palm back, kitchen fruit. Pearl felt dry, wanted fruit cold, chin chest up look. What fruit? Keaton eyes down, expressionless. Basket bought 2 days ago. Ah. Pearl remembered Gwendolyn fruit kept back. Eat now or porridge first? Casual asked. Pearl released, slippers kitchen ran, now. Entered, cut fruit plated, side mango sago. Pearl loved mango, favorite dessert. HK Tsim Shatsui shop bought every time. Packaging familiar. Walked, opened, reacted seconds, looked door. Keaton leaned, frame looked, don't eat kitchen. Pearl bit lip skin, took spoon, head down ate. Keaton entered, rubbed lip stain, asked, good. Pearl didn't answer, up looked. Keaton brought HK last night? Keaton calm, glanced bowl, light said, no. Dessert morning fever receded, called Secretary Q air freight. Pearl pursed, tone unnatural, then how? Drove Beijing? Keaton brow picked, didn't answer, table eat. Reached fruit dessert, table walked. Pearl spoon tail followed out. Table sampan porridge, vegetables, light food. Pearl stomach empty, fever day didn't eat. Kitty jumped, interested dessert smelled. Keaton pulled chair sit, hand Kitty down. Kitty dissatisfied meowed, thrown chair bit arm, ran fast. Keaton glanced wrist, calm instructed eating Pearl, finish rest up. Day's Uncle Zhao drive work. Pearl head down, low mn, seconds later chewing mango muffled, thanks. Keaton turned paused, back look, cursed what? Pearl choked, who cursed said. Thanks, backwards fast awkward. Keaton eyes swept face, looked seconds, emotionless brow lifted, nodded, welcome. Future curse less fine. Rested 2 days weekend. Pearl felt almost well, Keaton let Uncle Zhao drive company. Gwendolyn out, evening Fairchild dinner. Monday morning meeting. Pearl Zoe late, back seats. Secretly dieting lately? Zoe wary look. Pearl puzzled shake, no. Zoe pinched waist thin, jealous. Pearl ticklish shrunk, chair noise, door pushed outside. Executives entered, Keaton surrounded entered, heard noise, eyes emotionless swept. Pearl slid back wall, awkward back. Simon projected minutes. Secretary distributed files, Pearl pencil drew randomly, listened. Later someone entered. Pearl didn't look up, thinking studying original drafts, visit Pine Hill later. Zoe poked pen. Pearl frowned side look, what? Zoe winked front. Pearl looked up front. Keaton side sat blue suit short hair woman, talking, expression indifferent but rare smile. Pearl clenched pencil. Zoe whispered, SAGY rep Catherine heard boss X. Pearl silent, eyes on two, uninterested, oh. Meeting over Pearl Zoe left. Back desk Zoe colleagues discussed Catherine. Pearl didn't join, stared computer drafts, brain empty. Felt fever lingering. Window faced crosswalk, trees tall yellowing. Meeting looked match. Keaton liked type, short hair handsome capable. Pearl brain messy, stared Pine Hill drafts, heart temper rose, closed computer cup pantry water. Afternoon quiet floor. Pantry near elevator Sylvia office. Sylvia office voices, door insulated unclear. Pearl tea bag hot water. Waiting Sylvia door opened. Keaton Catherine out, Sylvia sending talking. Pearl paused, glass looked. Meeting far didn't see clear. Now clear Catherine pretty, handsome features mixed. Unlike girls seen before. Keaton side never appeared such woman. Before marriage asked Gwendolyn Keaton consent. Paris heard friends say. Keaton loved girlfriend then, wallet grad photo. Photo wallet not Keaton style, must like very much. Uniting thought Keaton refuse. Franklin brought message Keaton chose her. Pearl surprised thought wallet girlfriend. Keaton willing break up alliance? Asked Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn looked rational told outside woman not affect alliance. Pearl half understood knew no right refuse. Post-marriage natural. Cert, cohabit, duty, pets, intimacy, spoil, indulgence. Only no jealousy possession. Alliance relation moderate restrain. Hot water flowed, bag floated. Pearl recovered, reached close taking. Cup hot burned finger. Low cry through cup sink. Noise loud Keaton waiting noticed, eyes through. Pearl didn't look, reached tissue. Wiping saw Keaton frown said Catherine walked in. Pearl through tissue sink tap. Cold water mask steps. What happened? Keaton sighed closed tap, fridge ice water pressed hand bottle. Pearl looked out, subconsciously pulled back. Keaton buckled wrist, pried fingers looked. Wrist held tight, ice pressed pain relieved. Cup dripping. Myself, Pearl struggled pull. Keaton ignored, ice away checked burn, relieved much. Pearl worried colleagues seeing, pushed unhurt hand pulled out. Keaton eyes down seconds, ice back hand, desk ointment? Pearl pinched bottle silent. Catherine outside waiting felt looking. Catherine maybe new wife maybe not. Pearl shame stealing caught owner. Keaton didn't care. Catherine waiting stared Pearl dark pupils stubborn awkward. Pearl! Called full name angry. Keaton ready. Catherine door leaning smiling. Pearl turned met eyes. Catherine friendly smiled. Pearl tight lips didn't express friendliness took cup left pantry desk. Keaton stood in the pantry, glanced at the ice water discarded on the side, picked up his phone to send Simon a message, then walked towards Catherine. Sorry. Catherine just smiled, speaking to him in English. That lovely girl just now looks familiar. I think I've seen her. Keaton stood with her in front of the elevator. Hearing this, he just looked at Catherine quietly. When? Catherine tilted her head mysteriously and smiled. 3 or 4 years ago, in your wallet, did you forget? You even said she was your kitty. Keaton's expression seemed to pause, but there wasn't much emotion in his eyes. He just reached out to press the elevator button, saying casually, "It slipped my mind." Catherine raised an eyebrow in slight surprise, stepped back to look towards the office area and said, "So, your kitty." Although a question, her expression was certain. Keaton watched the descending elevator numbers ahead, jawline appearing cold and severe, somewhat unkind. The elevator arrived at the floor. He stepped in first. Catherine still stood at the door without entering. He looked up, expression still calm, but nodded, "Yes, she is my kitty." Pearl's hand wasn't burned seriously, just a little red. Not long after returning to her desk, her phone received a call from a delivery driver saying her order arrived. She frowned and went to get it. It was burn ointment. Likely sent by Keaton. Taking the ointment back to her desk, Pearl opened the box and applied it to her reddened palm. A bitter herbal smell. Unpleasant. Off work, Uncle Zhao was in the company garage. Pearl took her bag to the garage, opened the rear door. Keaton sat in the back seat, where she usually sat. She didn't want to change seats, pursed her lips, threw her bag onto his lap, stood by the door looking at him. Keaton looked up, gazed at her for a few seconds, expression quite calm, removed her bag, moved to the other side, giving the seat to her. Pearl reluctantly got in. "Applied the ointment?" Keaton asked with no fluctuation in tone. Pearl's hand was sticky with ointment, threw her bag between them, intentionally blocking him, applied. Voice muffled, looking unwilling to talk to him. Keaton turned to look at her, lowered the partition in the back seat, directly pulled her injured wrist. "What are you doing?" Pearl frowned at him, afraid of Uncle Zhao hearing, lowered voice glaring. Keaton, expressionless, pulled her injured hand, checked the ointment application, then released. Pearl retracted her hand, leaned towards the window, further away. Uncle Zhao, driving in front, didn't notice the couple bickering again. Keaton watched her throwing temper unknown. "How did I provoke you again?" Pearl turned face, pretending not to hear. Keaton knew her personality, the more asked the more contrary, simply ignored. Car drove a while, stopped in jam. "You know in your heart," Pearl said abruptly. Keaton, processing files, didn't look up. "Know what?" Pearl turned to look, bit lip, stared seconds, tone stiff. "Catherine is your ex." Didn't want to say originally. Saying out weird, seemed jealous. But wouldn't be jealous of Keaton. Keaton hand paused, closed laptop, calm gaze. "What ex?" Pearl thought he denied. Angry instantly, raised ointmented hand glaring. "You say what ex?" Keaton gaze on face seconds, tone cold. "Catherine isn't my ex, I don't have an ex." Pearl stunned, froze obviously, expression strange disbelief. Keaton calm, leaned back looking. "So pantry afternoon because Catherine?" Pearl expression unnatural, denied immediately. "No." Keaton silent seconds. "Pearl, are you jealous?" "Who's jealous?" Pearl, like bristled cat, almost jumped. Just Keaton eyes black staring still waiting. "Just what?" Pearl throat stuck, couldn't find reason. "Absolutely not jealousy. Anyway, not jealousy." Face tight, pretended cold, like Gwendolyn serious. "Just reminding, don't go too far. Anyway, I'm wife. Ex matters don't bring surface, otherwise families won't. Won't, decent didn't come out." Keaton suddenly reached pinched cheeks to O shape. Pearl eyes rounded, stunned, reacted seconds like kitty confused looking. Keaton face unchanged, looking eyes serious, hand bad, pinched round, cheeks tone flat. "Pearl, speak properly." "You. Kia, ton, you release who not? Proper." Pearl struggled, slapped hand, rubbed red cheeks, frowning, glaring, dared not curse. Keaton watched, unconvinced expression, lips lifted lightly. No such fetish. Turned face, didn't look, tone indifferent. Also, Catherine doesn't like men. Pearl hands, covered cheeks, didn't realize info. What meant Catherine doesn't like men? Car moved past, long tunnel, green light folded in. Keaton face, half in shadow, cold, handsome, calm, indifferent. Pearl reacted seconds, couldn't help. You, mean? Keaton side glance face, literal meaning. Expression, indifferent, voice, emotionless. Read less, boring gossip. No no intention developing outside relations in marriage. Turned face, eyes met in green shadow. Pearl stunned, looking. He stared, Pearl eyes, no accident, this life only one Mrs. Kingsley. Arrived, Fairchild's dark. Pearl got off. Keaton let Uncle Zhao back, call later. Pearl didn't enter first, rare waiting doorsteps, Keaton together. Serena Zinnia arrived. Leon didn't come, Serena Sean there. Serena late, married Sean marriage, Gwendolyn Franklin, barely agreed. Sean not Beijing average, older former TA. But Serena liked obedient daughter, only rebellion. Luckily post-marriage, Sean quit, started company, family help, good listed. Of course, Franklin Gwendolyn most satisfied Keaton. Kingsley benefit, Leon Sean couldn't give. Otherwise selection, 3 daughters. Franklin away, abroad business. Serena Sean specifically for Keaton started chatting early. Heard Von Schning West City bidding. Serena active introduced. Land government key. Gwendolyn natural joined, school mentioned leaders optimistic. Sean nodded. Heard friends suburban development government support charity later many competing. Keaton didn't speak immediately, head down, clipped Pearl, missed lotus root ball bowl light said. Have plan. Serena smiled. Coincidence, brother-in-law company doing real estate too. Meaning clear, Keaton knows Sean architecture student half senior. Bidding risky, Von Schning, not guaranteed, Junning participate profit, not important, family help risk shared. Serena right. Gwendolyn leg unhealed wheelchair spoke for Serena, leaders optimistic risk exist, brothers help. Gwendolyn Serena duet, Keaton silent. Table awkward quiet. Keaton natural drank water, wiped Pearl pants crumbs. Sean felt stiff active, Junning business resort far maybe not? Unfinished, Serena knocked cup stopped. Maid served soup, Gwendolyn asked, Keaton sighed. Pearl head down, eating dishes suited taste. Whole process didn't look up. Every return NPC role. Situation better, Franklin absent. If present definitely asked share. Fairchild leeching known, Keaton understood. 3 years norm. Keaton undisguised attitude, teacher, mom friend regardless. Pearl ate half awkward, smelled soup. Wanted serve but kept head down. Keaton silent since start, sense desire, asked ladle, stood served bowl side, finally spoke. Bidding next month, Hangzhou, Von Schning, no absolute grasp. Junning business entry, 3 months participation, lowers credibility, inappropriate. Serena face ugly silent. Gwendolyn smiled relieved, fine but family, Keaton need help, ask us brother-in-law. Mood bad, Zinnia laughed, Gwendolyn glanced, shut up. Serena refused, didn't give up. Design drafts finalized. Keaton need let brother-in-law look new, he was Beijing you? Keaton tone, temperatureless, interrupted. Design part, Pearl responsible, anything help, ask her. Pearl drinking soup paused, looked up, Keaton. Keaton calm, looked down, asked opinion. Do you need help? Gwendolyn Serena looked Pearl. Before speaking, Serena said, Pearl industry new, Sean definitely course design better. Pearl. Keaton seemed unheard, others staring, Pearl asked again. Your design project need others participate. Pearl pinched spoon, pursed lips silent. Default outsider since young, no speech right, no one asked opinion. Paused, looked Serena, met eyes, shook head. No need alone complete. Serena face ugly, stood left table. Keaton face unchanged, light said, since Pearl no need then forget it. If follow up other Junning parts, I'll have Simon contact you.